I stepped into my childhood home wearing my best dress, ready to meet my sister's new husband for the first time. "She's just a bartender." My dad snorted to his golf buddies, not even greeting me. The contempt in his voice stung, but I kept smiling. Then Bradley, my sister Madison's new husband, turned toward me. Our eyes met. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. His face drained of color as he whispered something I'll never forget. "No, this can't be happening." Bradley's words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle, heavy and suffocating. The crystal fragments sparkled across my mother's imported Italian marble, each piece catching the light from the chandelier above us. Madison rushed forward with paper towels, her wedding ring catching my eye as she knelt beside the mess. 3 carats princess cut exactly the kind of ostentatious display our father would insist upon. "Bradley, honey, what's wrong?" Madison's voice pitched higher with concern as she glanced between her husband and me. Her blonde hair, styled in perfect waves for this family dinner, bounced as she moved. I recognized the work of her expensive stylist, the same one who'd refused to touch my hair when I was younger, because father wouldn't pay for both daughters. Bradley couldn't answer. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone, fingers fumbling across the screen. I watched him type my name into the search bar, Aletheamorrison. His breathing grew shallow as result after result populated his screen. Financial Times, Forbes, TechCrunch, Business Insider. The headlines scrolled past his widening eyes. Meanwhile, my father continued his performance for his audience. Richard Morrison, the great businessman holding court with his Wednesday night golf crew. Can you believe it, my daughter serving drinks to strangers? Wasting that expensive education on pouring whiskey and listening to sob stories? He laughed, the sound sharp and cruel, designed to cut. His friends, Harold Westbrook, James Chen, despite his own heritage, and Roberto Vasquez chuckled along uncomfortably. I maintained my composure, stepping carefully around the broken glass. My heels clicked against the marble as I approached Bradley with my hand extended. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Alethea Madison's sister." He recoiled as though my hand were a poisonous snake. His phone nearly joined the champagne glass on the floor as he stumbled backward. The movement was so dramatic that Harold stopped mid-laugh, his scotch hovering near his lips. Even my mother, Helen, poked her head out from the dining room where she'd been fussing with place settings. "Bradley." Madison stood abandoning the glass cleanup. Her voice carried an edge, now the sweetness curdling into something sharper. "What is going on? You're being incredibly rude to my sister." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The phone screen illuminated his face from below, casting strange shadows that made him look almost ghostly. I could see the headlines reflected in his pupils. Tech entrepreneur raises $50 million in Series B funding. Anonymous angel investor revealed as force behind Prometheus Innovations. The millennial mogul you've never heard of. I need to... Bradley's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Mr. Morrison, sir. Could I speak with you privately? It's about urgent business matters." My father straightened his tie, pleased to be needed. Business was his language, his territory. "Of course, Bradley. Gentlemen, excuse us for a moment. Help yourselves to more drinks. Helen, where's that wine we opened?" But Bradley wasn't moving toward the study yet. Instead, he held up his phone, angling it so only my father could see the screen. I watched Richard Morrison, the man who'd built his reputation on never showing weakness, stumble backward. His confident facade cracked like thin ice over deep water. "That's not... How is this..." My father's voice came out strangled. Bradley grabbed his arm, practically dragging him toward the study. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing through the sudden silence of the room. Madison stared at me, then at the closed door, then back at me. Her perfectly glossed lips formed a small O of confusion. Harold cleared his throat. "Well, this is unusual." Richard seemed rattled, James observed, setting down his drink. I've never seen him react like that to anything." Roberto nodded slowly. 20 years of business dealings, and I've never seen him lose his composure, not even when the Patterson deal fell through. I remained serene, walking to the bar to pour myself a glass of water. Not alcohol, never alcohol when I needed my wits sharp. Madison followed me, her heels clicking in agitated rhythm. "Alethea, what was on that phone? What did Bradley show, Daddy?" I took a slow sip of water, letting the cool liquid center me. I imagine he showed him exactly what he found when he searched my name. Which would be, what exactly, your bartending schedule? The sneer in her voice was pure Richard Morrison learned behavior from years of watching our father diminish others. Before I could respond, we heard the first shout from behind the study door. My father's voice, usually so controlled, cracked with disbelief. "That's impossible." The study door might as well have been a barrier between two worlds. On our side, the elegant living room with its carefully curated art and uncomfortable modern furniture. On the other, my father's sanctuary where he'd made deals that crushed smaller businesses and ruined families without losing a moment of sleep. Now his own chickens were coming home to roost, as grandmother used to say. Madison's hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. The brass turned halfway before catching. Locked. Of course he'd locked it. Richard Morrison never let anyone see him vulnerable, not even his favorite daughter. She pounded on the heavy wood with her fist, her engagement ring clicking against the surface. "Daddy Bradley, open this door right now." Her voice pitched higher with each word, the polished composure she'd inherited from years of private schools and etiquette lessons cracking like old paint. What is going on in there? My mother emerged from the kitchen carrying her famous pot roast on grandmother's silver platter. The smell of rosemary and garlic wafted through the room, a comforting aroma that seemed absurd given the circumstances. She'd changed into her hosting dress, the navy one with pearl buttons that she saved for important dinners. Her smile faltered as she took in the scene. Madison hammering on the study door, the golf buddies, shifting awkwardly in their seats, me standing calmly by the bar. What in heaven's name is happening here? Helen set the platter on the sideboard, her hands automatically smoothing her apron. "Where's Richard? We need to eat before everything gets cold." "Daddy locked himself in there with Bradley," Madison explained, still pounding. Something about Alethea made them both lose their minds. Harold Westbrook exchanged meaningful glances with James and Roberto. These men had known my father for decades, had witnessed his rise from middle management to CEO, had been there for his victories and his carefully hidden failures. They'd never seen him rattled. The atmosphere in the room shifted heavy with unspoken questions. My Aunt Dorothy chose that moment to glide in from the powder room, her silver hair perfectly coiffed and her knowing eyes taking in everything. She'd always been the observer in our family, the one who noticed things others missed. My, she murmured, settling into her favorite wingback chair. "I haven't felt tension like this since Mother's will reading." That comment landed like a small bomb. Madison whirled around. "What does grandmother's will have to do with anything?" Dorothy merely smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just remembering how surprising legal documents can be." Through the door, we could hear my father's voice rising and falling in waves. Words filtered through impossible and how long and what sounded like ruined. Bradley's responses were lower, urgent, insistent. I caught my name several times wrapped in tones of amazement and something that sounded like fear. "This is ridiculous," Madison announced. She grabbed a bronze bookend from a nearby shelf, prepared to break the lock. Madison Elizabeth Morrison. Helen's voice cracked like a whip. "You put that down this instant. That door cost more than your car." "I don't care about the door. My husband and my father are in there having some kind of breakdown about my bartender sister, and I want answers." The word bartender dripped with such disdain that even the golf buddies looked uncomfortable. Roberto cleared his throat. "Perhaps Alethea has some hidden talents we're unaware of." Hidden talents. Madison laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. She pours drinks for tips. She lives in a studio apartment. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. What hidden talents could she possibly have that would make Daddy react like this? I set down my water glass with a gentle clink. Every eye in the room turned to me. The silence stretched like taffy, sweet and sticky and suffocating. From the study, we heard what sounded like furniture being moved, drawers being yanked open, papers rustling frantically. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. Complete silence fell over the house, the kind that makes you notice the grandfather clocks ticking and the hum of the air conditioning. Even Madison stopped her assault on the door, stepping back as though the silence itself had pushed her. The lock clicked. The door swung open, slowly revealing Bradley first. His expensive shirt was soaked through with sweat, dark patches spreading from his underarms and collar. His perfectly styled hair stuck to his forehead in damp strands. He looked like he'd run a marathon in his wedding suit. Behind him, nothing. The study gaped empty and dark. "Where's my father?" Helen's voice came out small, uncertain. Bradley swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He needs a moment. He asked me to come out first. A moment for what? Madison grabbed her husband's arm. "Bradley James Thornton, you tell me right now what's happening." But Bradley wasn't looking at his wife. His eyes fixed on me with an expression I'd seen before in boardrooms and investment meetings, when people finally understood who they were really dealing with. It was the look of someone recalculating every assumption they'd ever made. He straightened his shoulders, wiped his palms on his ruined shirt, and spoke in a clear, carrying voice that reached every corner of the room. "Your father owes you an apology. Tell them about Prometheus Innovations, Alethea. Tell them what you really do." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I saw Madison's face cycle through emotions like a slideshow. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a creeping fear that maybe, just maybe everything she thought she knew was wrong. "What are you talking about?" Madison's voice came out sharp enough to cut glass. "What is Prometheus Innovations? Alethea, what did you tell him?" I walked to the center of the room, my heels marking each step with precision. The water glass remained in my hand, steady as stone. Helen perched on the edge of her favorite chair, the pot roast forgotten and cooling on its silver platter. The golf buddies leaned forward like spectators at a prize fight. "I didn't tell him anything," I said calmly. "He found it himself when he searched my name. Would you like me to explain, or should we wait for Dad?" "Explain what?" Madison's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Stop playing games." I took a breath, feeling the weight of 5 years of secrets ready to tumble into the light. I'm not just a bartender. I haven't been just anything for a very long time. "What does that mean?" Helen's voice wavered. "It means I own 7 establishments across 3 states. The Gilded Lily in downtown, Midnight's Garden in Austin, the Velvet Room in Nashville. 4 others you wouldn't recognize because they cater to clientele far above Dad's golf buddies' pay grade." I let that sink in, watching Harold's face flush red. What you call bartending is my way of staying connected to my employees and understanding my customers firsthand. Twice a week, I work the bar at the Gilded Lily. Not because I need the tips, but because real leadership means knowing every aspect of your business. Madison shook her head. "No, that's impossible. You live in a studio apartment. You drive that ancient Honda." "I live in a penthouse above the Gilded Lily," I corrected. The studio was a story I let you believe because it was easier than explaining why I didn't want to come to family dinners. The Honda. It was grandmother's. I keep it maintained perfectly because unlike some people in this family, I value sentiment over status. My mother's hand flew to her throat, fingers worrying the pearl necklace she always wore to important dinners. 7 businesses. But how? When? I started with a food truck when I was 22, the Midnight Snack. Maybe you remember Madison. I asked you to come to the grand opening, but you said you had a sorority formal that was more important. Madison's face colored. I didn't think... No, you didn't. I set down my water glass on a coaster, the small gesture somehow holding everyone's attention. But that truck turned into a brick-and-mortar restaurant within 18 months. Then another. Then I diversified into upscale lounges and entertainment venues, each one profitable within its first year. Bradley cleared his throat. Tell them the rest. The rest? I smiled and saw Harold flinch. Oh, you mean Prometheus Innovations. What is Prometheus Innovations? Dorothy asked, though something in her expression suggested she already suspected. It's a technology incubator I founded 4 years ago. We identify promising startups, provide seed funding, mentorship, and connections. Our focus is on companies led by women and minorities who traditionally get overlooked by venture capitalists. I paused, letting the weight build. We went public last month. Initial valuation $2.1 billion. The sound Helen made wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a sob. It was something primal, the noise of a worldview shattering. Roberto's Scotch glass slipped from nerveless fingers, amber liquid spreading across the Persian rug. You're lying. Madison's voice came out strangled. You have to be lying. I pulled out my phone, navigating to the Wall Street Journal article from 4 weeks ago. The headline read, Mystery Angel Investor Behind Prometheus Innovations Revealed as Hospitality Entrepreneur A. Morrison. I handed it to Madison, watched her face pale as she scrolled through the article. But this says... She looked up at me, then down at the phone, then at Bradley. $2 billion. 2.1, Bradley corrected. His voice carried a bitter edge. Do you have any idea how long I've been trying to get a meeting with Prometheus? 2 years. 2 years of emails, calls, connections, trying to get in front of the legendary A. Morrison. And the whole time... He laughed, the sound hollow. The whole time she was serving drinks at the Gilded Lily, probably watching me make a fool of myself trying to impress the wrong people. You came into my bar, I asked, genuinely curious. 6 times. You served me yourself twice. I tipped you 20% and complained about how hard it was to break into the tech investment scene. He shook his head. You just smiled and said you were sure I'd figure it out. Wait, James Chen set down his empty glass with excessive care. You're telling us that Richard's daughter, the one he's been mocking all evening, is worth billions. On paper, I clarified. Most of it's tied up in investments and property, but yes, my net worth exceeded his about 18 months ago. That's when Madison screamed. It wasn't a horror movie scream or a dramatic gesture. It was pure, raw emotion tearing out of her throat as reality crashed through her carefully constructed world. When she could finally speak again, her words came out in a rush. You're lying. You have to be. Because if this is true, then you know about the trust fund and you know what Daddy did. The room went still as death. Madison's hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late. The words were out there, floating in the air like confession at a funeral. Everyone turned to look at her, then at me, then at the still empty doorway to my father's study. What trust fund? Helen's voice came out thin, stretched tight with dawning horror. Madison, what are you talking about? Madison stood frozen, caught between truths like a deer in headlights. Her perfect makeup began to crack as tears welled in her eyes. The confident, polished daughter was crumbling, leaving behind someone young and frightened and guilty. Tell them, I said softly, or I will. I can't. 3 years ago, I began my voice steady as a newsreader's. I needed to establish a more complex corporate structure for my expanding businesses. My lawyers were conducting due diligence when they discovered something interesting in the public records. Our grandmother, Dorothy Morrison, had established a trust fund. The sole beneficiary was meant to be me. Dorothy leaned forward in her wingback chair, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. Mother did always say she was leaving something special for you, Alethea. She said you had her spirit. The trust contained her entire personal fortune, I continued. $14 million in blue-chip stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings. Not the family money, mind you. This was what she'd built herself through careful investment over 60 years. She specifically excluded it from the marital assets when she updated her will. 14 million. Harold's voice cracked. These golf buddies thought they were wealthy, but 14 million was a different league entirely. But I don't understand, Helen said. If Mother Morrison left that to Alethea, then where? Ask Madison. I kept my gaze steady on my sister. Ask her where the money went. Madison's tears flowed freely now, ruining her $300 makeup application. Daddy said you were irresponsible. He said you'd waste it all, that you couldn't handle that kind of money. He said it was for your own good. So he had his lawyer alter the documents. I pulled a folder from my purse, the one I'd been carrying for 3 years. Frederick Jameson, his personal attorney for 20 years, forged grandmother's signature on a codicil that redirected everything to Madison just 2 weeks before grandmother died. Then Frederick retired early and moved to Costa Rica. Funny how that worked out. The papers spilled across the coffee table, bank statements, legal documents, a private investigator's report, evidence I'd gathered quietly, methodically waiting for the right moment. Dorothy picked up one of the pages, her face hardening as she read. "This is Mother's signature," she said slowly. "But it's not. The loop on the M is wrong. She always made it higher." She looked at Madison with something between pity and disgust. "You knew. You took the money knowing it was stolen." "I needed it." Madison's voice rose to a wail. "Do you know how expensive it is to maintain the lifestyle Daddy expects? The country club fees, the charity galas, the wardrobe, the car, the apartment in the city. I couldn't work because it would embarrass him, but he also wouldn't give me enough to live on. When he came to me with the papers, what was I supposed to do?" "Have a conscience," Roberto suggested dryly. "Easy for you to say." Madison whirled on him. "You've never had Richard Morrison for a father. You've never had to be perfect every second of every day. Never had to be the daughter who makes up for the embarrassing one who won't fall in line." "Is that what you think I am?" I asked. "An embarrassment? Aren't you—" Madison laughed bitterly. "You could have had everything. Daddy would have brought you into the business, set you up with the right connections, the right husband. Instead, you insisted on this ridiculous independence. Do you know what he tells people when they ask about you, his daughter the bartender? Like you're some kind of failure he has to apologize for. While his daughter, the thief, sits pretty on stolen money." The words came out colder than I intended. Helen stood abruptly, swaying slightly. "I can't." She stumbled toward the kitchen, one hand pressed to her stomach. "Mom," I called after her, but she waved me off, disappearing through the swinging door. Bradley approached Madison slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "You knew about this when we got married. You knew your trust fund was stolen." She nodded miserably. I thought it didn't matter. Alethea was doing fine with her little bar. She didn't need millions. She always said she didn't care about money. I didn't care about the money, I confirmed. I cared about the betrayal. Grandmother left that to me because she believed in me. Because unlike everyone else in this family, she saw potential where Dad saw disappointment. And you took that away. Both of you. "How did you find out?" Dorothy asked. "During the expansion to Austin, we needed to verify I had no outstanding claims or liens that could affect the business loans. My lawyers were thorough. They found the original trust documents filed with the state, then the amended versions. The timeline didn't add up. Grandmother was in the hospital when the codicil was supposedly signed. She couldn't even hold a pen those last 2 weeks. "But you never said anything," Madison whispered. 3 years and you never confronted us." I smiled and several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Why would I? By the time I found out, I'd already built my first 3 establishments. I was negotiating the deals that would become Prometheus. I didn't need grandmother's money anymore. But more importantly, I wanted to see what you'd do with it, how you'd use that gift you'd stolen. And Dorothy's tone suggested she already knew the answer. Country club memberships, designer clothes, a wedding that cost more than some people's houses, vacations to private islands, not a single investment, Not $1 to charity, not even the animal shelter grandmother volunteered at for 30 years. I shook my head. You took $14 million and turned it into nothing but Instagram photos and credit card debt. How do you know about the debt? Madison's voice came out small. Because I'm the one who's been paying it off. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison stared at me like I'd spoken in tongues. Bradley's mouth fell open. Even the golf buddies looked stunned. What Madison finally managed. 6 months ago, you were about to default on your American Express Black Card, the one Daddy got you but doesn't pay for. You owed $43,000. I paid it. 3 months before that, it was the car loan. 2 months before that, your student loans from the MBA program you never finished. But why? Because despite everything, you're still my sister, and because I wanted you to have the chance to do better. To maybe wake up one day and realize that money is a tool, not a toy. To understand what grandmother knew, that wealth comes with responsibility. That's when my father finally emerged from his study. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His perfect silver hair was mussed, his red power tie askew. In his hands, he clutched a manila folder that trembled with his shaking fingers. His eyes found mine across the room, and I saw something I'd never seen before in Richard Morrison's face. Alethea, he said, his voice hoarse. There's more. The lawyer, he left these documents with me. They're about your birth mother. The manila folder in my father's hands might as well have been a bomb for the way everyone reacted. Helen, who had just returned from the kitchen with a glass of water, dropped it. The crystal shattered against the marble, the second broken glass of the evening water, spreading like secrets across the floor. My what? The words came out of my mouth calm and measured, but inside something seismic shifted. I'd prepared for many revelations tonight, but not this one. Richard, no. Helen's voice came out as a moan. She gripped the door frame for support, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. They need to know, my father said. His usual commanding presence had evaporated, leaving behind a man who looked hollow, carved out by his own choices. She deserves to know. Know what? Madison had gone pale as milk. What are you talking about? Mom is right there. Our mother is Helen Morrison. Dorothy rose from her chair, moving with the careful grace of someone who'd suspected this moment might come. Oh, Richard, after all these years, Mother always said the truth would find its way out. Someone please tell me what's happening. Madison's voice pitched toward hysteria. My father opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were documents yellowed with age photographs, medical records. His voice, when it came, sounded like it was traveling from a great distance. Your biological mother wasn't Helen. Her name was Dr. Catherine Walsh. She was my business partner when I was starting out. Brilliant economist. She designed the financial models that built the foundation of Morrison Industries. I remained perfectly still, processing this information like data inputs. Around me, the room erupted. That's impossible, Madison shrieked. We're sisters. We look alike. We have the same eyes. You have Richard's eyes, Dorothy said quietly. Both of you do. But Alethea, you have Catherine's mind. I see it now. The way you stand, the way you think 10 steps ahead. God, you even hold your water glass the same way she did. Helen sank into the nearest chair, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't have children. The doctors tried everything. IVF hormone specialists in Switzerland. Nothing worked. Richard needed an heir for the business, someone to carry on the Morrison legacy. So you what bought a baby? Madison's voice dripped acid. It wasn't like that, my father protested, but Helen cut him off. Yes, it was. Tell them the truth, Richard. All of it. My father's hands shook as he pulled out a photograph. Even from across the room, I could see the woman in it looked like me. Same dark hair, same sharp cheekbones, same way of tilting her head when thinking. But her eyes held a warmth mine had learned to hide. Catherine and I were partners. More than partners. We were He swallowed hard. She was everything Helen wasn't. Brilliant, driven, innovative. She saw financial patterns like other people see colors. Together, we built the algorithm that became the core of Morrison Industries' trading platform. You had an affair, I stated, not a question. We fell in love, he corrected, then caught Helen's glare. Or I thought we did. When Catherine got pregnant, she wanted to keep the baby, said she'd raise it alone, wouldn't ask for anything. But I couldn't have that scandal. Not when I was trying to secure the Pemberton contracts. A pregnant, unmarried business partner, it would have ruined everything. So what did you do? Though I suspected I already knew. I convinced her to let Helen and I adopt the baby. Told her it would be better for everyone. The child would have two parents' financial security, the Morrison name. Catherine would be free to focus on her career. He laughed bitterly. She believed me, signed the papers, kept working like nothing had changed even as her pregnancy advanced. Bradley had been silent through all of this, but now he spoke up. Dr. Catherine Walsh, the Catherine Walsh, the one who wrote Predictive Economic Modeling in Emerging Markets. You know her work. I turned to him, grateful for the distraction from the emotional nuclear bomb exploding in my family's living room. Know it. It's required reading at Wharton. Her theories revolutionized how we understand market volatility, but she died in... His eyes widened. She died when her daughter would have been 2 years old. Cancer, my father said. Aggressive pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to when you pushed her out of the company while she was dying, I finished. The silence that followed was suffocating. Madison stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Helen wept silently into her hands. The golf buddies looked like they wanted to be anywhere else in the world. How long have you known? My father asked. That I was adopted about 10 minutes. That you built your empire on the work of a brilliant woman you erased from history longer than you'd think. Dorothy made a sound like a bitter laugh. Mother knew. She kept all of Catherine's papers, her original patents. Told me before she died that the truth would come out eventually. That's why she left everything to you, Alethea. She said you had your real mother's gift. The trust fund was Catherine's work turned into money. I said, understanding flooding through me. Grandmother was trying to give me back what was stolen. And then Richard stole it again, Dorothy added. Like father, like son. Our father did the same thing to our mother's sister. It's the Morrison way, apparently. Take what women create and claim it as your own. I gave Catherine credit, my father protested weakly. Where, I pulled out my phone, did a quick search. Show me one place where Morrison Industries acknowledges Dr. Catherine Walsh's contributions. One press release, one annual report, one mention anywhere. He couldn't. She's listed as a junior consultant in the early files, Helen said suddenly. Everyone turned to her. She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. I went through them all when I was trying to understand why my husband spent more time at work than at home. C. Walsh, junior consultant. That's all she got. Well, he got billions, Roberto muttered. But she's dead, Madison said desperately. She died when Alethea was 2. That's what you said. Cancer. That's what Richard told everyone, Helen said. That's what he told me. But I saw the medical bills, saw the divorce papers Catherine filed 2 weeks before her diagnosis. Divorce papers. This was news even to me. Helen stood unsteadily, walked to an antique secretary desk in the corner. From a hidden compartment, she pulled out another folder. I've kept these for 35 years, waiting, knowing this day would come. She handed them to me. Divorce proceedings Catherine Walsh vs. Richard Morrison, citing theft of intellectual property fraud and emotional abuse, filed 2 weeks before her cancer diagnosis, never completed. You were married? Madison's voice came out strangled. For 18 months, my father admitted. Secret ceremony. I told her we'd announce it once the company was stable. Then Helen's father offered to invest $10 million if I married his daughter. So I did. Bigamy, James Chen said faintly. You committed bigamy. The marriage to Catherine wasn't legal, my father said quickly. We used fake names, said it was romantic. She didn't know I was already planning to marry Helen. I looked at the divorce papers more carefully. Catherine had known about Helen, had known about all of it. The theft of her work, the bigamy, the lies. She'd been building a case when the cancer struck. She didn't just die, I said slowly. She was murdered by stress and betrayal while trying to fight back against a man who stole everything from her, including her daughter. I gave you a good life, my father protested. The best schools, every opportunity. You gave me Helen's coldness and your contempt, I corrected. You gave me a sister who learned to see me as competition instead of family. You gave me the Morrison name while erasing my mother's existence. You gave me everything except the truth. Bradley suddenly snapped his fingers. Wait, Catherine Walsh, Wall Street Journal, 1991. There was an article. He typed frantically on his phone. Here. Brilliant economist disappears from public life amid health concerns. But it mentions she was working on something revolutionary before she vanished. A new economic model that could predict market crashes with 97% accuracy. The Morrison algorithm, all three golf buddies said in unison. The foundation of a $40 billion empire, Warisai added, built on theft and lies. That's when Bradley started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was bitter and broken and full of irony. Madison stared at her husband like he'd lost his mind. What could possibly be funny about this? She demanded. Bradley held up his phone, showing a photograph from what looked like an academic conference. This is why I wanted to meet with Prometheus so badly, why I've been trying for 2 years. My entire business model is based on the Walsh framework. I've been building on Catherine's published work, trying to complete what she started. He looked at me with something approaching awe. You're her daughter, the actual daughter of Dr. Catherine Walsh. Do you understand what this means? Her unpublished papers, her research notes? If they still exist. They exist, Dorothy said quietly. Mother made sure of that too. All eyes turned to her. She smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. You didn't think she'd keep them in the house where Richard could find them, did you? They're in a safety deposit box. Have been for 35 years, waiting for Catherine's daughter to be ready to claim them. You knew, I asked her. All this time you knew. I suspected. Mother confirmed it near the end. She said Catherine made her promise to protect them until you were strong enough to handle the truth, smart enough to use them wisely. She studied me carefully. I'd say that time has come. My father collapsed back against the doorframe. It doesn't matter. Catherine's dead, has been for over 30 years. Ancient history. Actually, I said, pulling out my own phone, about that, I recently hired a very good private investigator, the kind who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found, or people who were declared dead but might not be. The room went silent again. Even the grandfather clock seemed to pause its ticking. What are you saying? Helen whispered. I'm saying that death certificates can be forged, especially when someone has reason to disappear, when someone is being systematically destroyed by a powerful man who's already stolen everything from them. That's insane, my father said, but his voice shook. Is it, I asked, is it more insane than bigamy, than theft, than building an empire on someone else's genius while erasing them from history? Madison grabbed my arm. Are you saying our mother, your mother, might still be alive? I looked at my father, watched the color drain from his face as he realized I might not be bluffing. I'm saying Catherine Walsh was brilliant enough to design algorithms that made billions, smart enough to see through his schemes and file for divorce, strong enough to try to fight him even while dying of cancer. I paused, letting the weight of it settle over the room like fog. Do you really think a woman like that would just conveniently die right when she became inconvenient? My father's legs gave out. He slid down the doorframe until he was sitting on the floor, the powerful Richard Morrison reduced to a broken old man clutching an empty folder. No, he whispered. I saw the death certificate, attended the cremation. She's gone. You saw what someone wanted you to see, I said. The question is, what are you going to do when you find out the truth? That's when Bradley's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went pale. It's the FBI. They're at my office. They want to talk about Morrison Industries' financial irregularities dating back to 1990. My father's head snapped up. What? Bradley listened for a moment, then lowered the phone. They're asking about the Walsh framework, about patents that might have been illegally transferred. They want to know about Dr. Catherine Walsh. He looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. You did this. You've been planning this for years. I smiled, and it was my mother's smile. Catherine's smile. The smile of a woman who played the long game and played it well. I learned from the best, even if I never got to meet her. Alethea, Madison said slowly, what have you done? Before I could answer, Bradley's phone rang again. This time, when he looked at the screen, he laughed that bitter laugh again. It's a text from my father. The FBI is at his house, too, asking about a deal he made with Richard Morrison in 1991, about payments that might connect to a missing economist. He looked up at my father, still crumpled on the floor. Tell your daughter about the deal we made, Richard. Tell her why I really married Madison. Tell her about the debt. The debt. My father repeated the words like they were poison on his tongue. He struggled to his feet, using the doorframe for support, looking every one of his 72 years, and then some. You had to bring that up now. Now seems like the perfect time. Bradley said, his bitter smile growing wider. Since we're apparently having a night of revelations, since the FBI is knocking on doors asking about financial irregularities, might as well put all the cards on the table. Madison looked between her husband and her father, confusion and fear warring on her face. What debt? What deal, Bradley? What is he talking about? I moved to the center of the room, positioning myself where I could see everyone's faces. The golf buddies had given up any pretense of casual conversation. Harold gripped his empty glass like a lifeline. James kept checking his phone, probably wondering if the FBI would come for him next. Roberto had the careful stillness of a man calculating exit strategies. 5 years ago, I began watching my father's face drain of what little color remained. Morrison Industries started showing some interesting patterns in its trading algorithms. Patterns that suggested someone was siphoning money. Not huge amounts, just enough to stay under the radar. But when you're moving billions through the system, even small percentages add up. How do you know this? Harold asked, though he looked like he already suspected the answer. Because I've spent those 5 years quietly buying shares in Morrison Industries, through shell companies, offshore entities, private trades, never enough to trigger SEC notifications, always staying just under the reporting thresholds. I pulled out a slim tablet from my purse. As of market close yesterday, my various holdings add up to 51%. The sound my father made wasn't quite human. Helen gasped. Madison shook her head in denial, but the best reaction came from the golf buddies whose phones all started buzzing simultaneously. That's impossible, James said, even as he read the emergency notification from his broker. The Morrison Family Trust owns 55%. It's been that way for 20 years. The trust owns 55% of the shares that existed 20 years ago, I corrected. But Daddy's been issuing new shares to cover his debts, private placements he thought no one would notice, diluting the trust's holdings with each transaction. You're lying. But my father's protest was weak without conviction. I turned the tablet around, showing them the Bloomberg terminal I'd had installed specifically for tonight. Real-time ownership data for Morrison Industries scrolled across the screen. Company after company, all leading back to a single beneficial owner, Alethea Morrison. Phoenix Holdings, 12%. Prometheus Ventures, 15%. Walsh Capital, 18%. Various smaller entities making up the remaining 6%. I set the tablet on the coffee table where everyone could see it. Congratulations, Dad. You're now a minority shareholder in your own company. The board won't stand for this. Harold said, but his voice shook. "We have procedures, protocols." "The board serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder," I reminded him, "which is now me. And speaking of the board," I glanced at my phone, "you should all be receiving formal notification right about now." 3 phones chimed in unison. Harold, James, and Roberto pulled them out with shaking hands. Their faces went through identical transformations as they read confusion, disbelief, fear. "Emergency board meeting," Roberto read. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Motion to discuss leadership changes and financial irregularities dating back 24 years. "You can't do this," my father said. "I built this company. It's mine." "You built it on Catherine Walsh's work," I countered. "On stolen algorithms and forged patents. On my mother's genius that you claimed as your own. Consider this a long overdue correction." Madison had been silent through all of this, but now she exploded. "You're destroying our family. You're ruining everything out of spite." "Am I?" I pulled another folder from my purse. The purse was like a magician's hat tonight, full of 35 years' worth of truth. "Let me show you what I'm actually saving you from." I spread the financial reports across the table, covering the ownership documents. Morrison Industries' real books, the ones my father thought were hidden behind layers of encryption and offshore accounting. The ones I'd accessed through perfectly legal audits once I'd acquired enough shares to demand them. "Embezzlement," I said, pointing to the first column. $2 million here, $3 million there. Funneled through construction projects that never quite finished consulting fees to companies that existed only on paper. 20 years of skimming from your own company, Dad. That's a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Accounting errors." "Which is what you told the Pemberton Group when they started asking questions. What you told the Shanghai investors when their returns came up short. What you've been telling everyone while you bled the company dry to fund your lifestyle." I turned to another page. Country club memberships at 4 different clubs. The house in Aspen you told Helen was a corporate retreat. The gambling debts. "Gambling debts." Helen's voice came out strangled. "Poker games with stakes that would make professional players blush. Baccarat in Monaco. That trip to Macau he told you was a trade conference. He lost $8 million in 3 days. The golf buddies exchanged looks. They'd known about the gambling, had probably participated, but $8 million was beyond even their expensive tastes. Which brings us to Bradley's father. I continued enjoying the way Bradley flinched. "Tell them about the arrangement, Bradley. Tell them why you really pursued Madison." Bradley loosened his tie like it was strangling him. "My father, Jonathan Thornton, runs a private equity firm, specializes in distressed assets. 3 years ago, Richard came to him desperate for capital. The gambling debts had gotten out of control. There were people making threats, real threats, not the kind you can lawyer your way out of." "Bradley," Madison whispered, "please." "He needed $20 million fast. My father agreed, but at a price. 40% interest compounded monthly, and a guarantee his daughter's hand in marriage to create a permanent business alliance." Madison's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "You married me for money. Our whole relationship was a business deal." "It started that way," Bradley admitted. "I'm not proud of it, but Madison, I did fall in love with you. That part became real." "How touching," I said dryly, "except you left out the best part. The marriage contract included a poison pill. If the loan wasn't repaid in full within 5 years, Thornton Equity would get seats on Morrison Industries' board, enough seats to force a sale of assets. 2 more years, my father muttered. I just needed 2 more years. You never had 2 more years, I informed him. The company's been insolvent for 18 months. You've been moving money around like a shell game using new investments to pay off old debts. The Ponzi scheme of the corporate world. Roberto stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. My lawyers... Sit down. My voice cut through the room like a blade. We're not done yet. He sat. Here's what's going to happen. I said, switching to the voice I used in boardrooms when closing deals. Tomorrow morning, the board will meet. You'll vote to install me as CEO of Morrison Industries. My father will step down citing health concerns. We'll announce a comprehensive audit and restructuring. You can't force us, Harold protested. Can't I? I smiled. Harold, should we discuss the kickbacks from the Riverside development, James the insider trading on the Singapore deal, Roberto, that unfortunate situation with your nephew's import business? All three men went pale. My father stared at me like I was a stranger. How long have you been planning this? He asked. 5 years, 3 months and 16 days, I replied. Since the day I discovered what you did to my mother, since I learned that everything you built was stolen from a woman you erased. But the company will crash, Madison said desperately. Stock prices will plummet. We'll lose everything. The company will survive, I assured her. I've already lined up bridge financing from 3 separate institutions. Clean money, legitimate sources. The stock will take a hit, but it'll recover once the market sees competent leadership. And what about us? Helen asked quietly. What happens to your family? I softened slightly, looking at the woman who'd raised me despite knowing I was evidence of her husband's betrayal. You'll be taken care of. There's no reason to punish you for his crimes. Madison, too, once the divorce is finalized. Divorce? Madison and Bradley said in unison. Oh, did I forget to mention? I pulled out one more document. Bradley, your prenup has an interesting clause. Fraud in the inducement voids the entire agreement. Since you married her under false pretenses, she can walk away with nothing owed to you or your father. Bradley laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. You know what good. I'm tired of being his pawn anyway. This is insane, my father said. You're destroying everything I built over some grudge about a woman who's been dead for 30 years. About that, I said, pulling out my phone. Remember that private investigator I mentioned, the one specializing in finding people who don't want to be found? Everyone leaned forward. 3 months ago, they found a very interesting paper trail. Death certificate filed in New Jersey for Catherine Walsh. But here's the interesting part. No body was ever transferred to the crematorium. No ashes were ever collected. The funeral home went out of business 6 months later, all records conveniently lost in a fire. That doesn't mean anything, my father insisted, but sweat beaded on his forehead. By itself, no. But combined with this, I showed them a grainy photograph on my phone. Passport photo from Canada, 1991. Dr. Catherine Williams, economics professor at McGill University. Looks remarkably like Catherine Walsh, doesn't she? The room was silent except for Helen's quiet sobbing. She's been alive all this time, Madison whispered. I don't know, I admitted. The trail went cold in 2005, but the FBI is very interested in finding out. Apparently, someone's been feeding them information about Morrison Industries for years. Anonymous tips that led nowhere until recently when someone provided them with enough evidence to open a formal investigation. My father aged another decade in front of our eyes. Catherine, she's been planning this for 30 years. Or maybe, I suggested, a daughter who inherited her mother's gift for long-term strategy decided to finish what she started. Either way, Bradley said, standing and straightening his ruined shirt. I'm out. Madison, I'm sorry. I'll sign whatever divorce papers you want. No contest, no demands. You deserve better than what my father and yours cooked up. He headed for the door, pausing just before he left. Alethea. That meeting I wanted so badly with Prometheus. Innovations, I get it now. I wasn't ready. Maybe someday when I've built something real instead of riding on my father's dirty money, we can talk. I nodded. Maybe. He left and the room felt smaller without him. Madison curled into herself on the sofa looking like a broken doll. The golf buddies sat in stunned silence, probably calculating how quickly they could liquidate their positions. Helen had stopped crying, staring at nothing with empty eyes. And my father. He looked at me with something that might have been respect if it wasn't poisoned by fear and rage. You're just like her, he said. Catherine, same mind, same ruthlessness, same inability to let things go. The difference is, I told him, I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to let you erase me or steal from me or pretend I don't exist. I'm going to sit in your office at your desk and run your company the way it should have been run from the beginning, with integrity. The board won't. The board will do exactly what I tell them. I cut him off. Because the alternative is federal prison. Orange isn't a good color for any of you. That's when Dorothy, who'd been quietly watching everything unfold, finally spoke up. There's one more thing, she said, about Mother's death, Richard. I think it's time you told the truth about that, too. My father's face went from pale to gray. Dorothy, don't. Don't what? She stood moving with the careful dignity of someone about to drop the final bomb. Don't mention that I saw you leaving Mother's house at 3 a.m. Don't talk about what I found in your car the next day. Or don't bring up what the nice young FBI agent asked me about last week. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. What? I asked very quietly. Did you see Aunt Dorothy? She looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing that had been watching and waiting for 35 years. I saw your father murder my mother, and I can prove it. Dorothy's accusation hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. My father stumbled backward, catching himself on the doorframe he'd been using for support all evening. The golf buddies looked ready to bolt, their fight-or-flight instincts screaming flight. Only Madison seemed too shocked to react, staring at Dorothy like she'd spoken in ancient Greek. That's insane, my father managed, but his voice cracked on the last word. Mother died of heart failure. The doctors confirmed it. Natural causes. Natural causes. Dorothy repeated her tone, making the words sound filthy. Yes, I suppose a massive overdose of digoxin would cause the heart to fail quite naturally. Tell me, Richard, where did you get the extra vials of her medication? Or did you just use what was already in her medicine cabinet? Helen made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a moan. Dorothy, what are you saying? I'm saying what I should have said 35 years ago, Dorothy replied. But I was younger, then scared, and Richard was so convincing. Mother was old, he said. Her heart was failing anyway. Why cause a scandal? Why put the family through that? Because it was murder, I said flatly. Dorothy nodded. June 15th, 1990. I was staying with Mother because she'd had a minor fall. Richard came by around 9 that evening, said he wanted to check on her. They talked in the study for hours. I fell asleep on the couch, but woke when I heard the front door. 3:17 a.m., according to the grandfather clock she loved so much. She moved to the window, gazing out at the manicured lawn as if she could see into the past. I watched him walk to his car. He was carrying something, a small bag. Medical waste, I thought later. He sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, just sitting there in the dark. Then he drove away. That doesn't prove anything, my father protested, but sweat now poured down his face. No. Dorothy agreed. But the vials I found in your car the next day might. You came to the house after the ambulance left, so concerned, so grieved. You hugged me and said we'd get through it together. Your car keys fell out of your pocket. She turned back to face us, her expression carved from stone. When I returned them to your Mercedes, I saw the medical bag in the back seat. It was partially open, empty vials of digoxin spilled out. Mother's prescription with her name on the labels. You kept them, Helen whispered. Of course I kept them, along with a suicide note. If the room had been quiet before now, it was a vacuum. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. What suicide note? Madison's voice came out as a squeak. Dorothy walked to the secretary desk where Helen had gotten the divorce papers. From another hidden compartment, she pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Mother's handwriting, she said. Dated the night she died. It says she couldn't bear the shame of what Richard had done, that she was sorry for failing to protect Catherine and her child, that she was taking her own life rather than watch him destroy anyone else. But that's My father's legs gave out completely. He slid to the floor, back against the wall. I didn't force her to write that. No. Dorothy agreed. You just told her the truth, that you'd stolen Catherine's work, that you'd driven her away, possibly to her death, that you'd already started the process to steal the trust fund meant for Alethea. You confessed everything, thinking she was too old and weak to do anything about it. She had a heart condition, he said weakly. The shock of learning her son was a monster might have killed her, yes, but you didn't wait to find out. You helped her along with enough digitalis to kill a horse. Dorothy held up the evidence bag. What you didn't know was that she'd already written this letter, hidden it in her favorite book, the family Bible you never bothered to open. I stood perfectly still, processing this final piece of the puzzle. My grandmother, the one person who'd shown me unconditional love, had been murdered by my father to keep his secrets buried. The trust fund hadn't just been about money, it had been about justice. 35 years, I said quietly. You've known for 35 years that he murdered her, and you said nothing. Dorothy's composure finally cracked. I was terrified. He'd killed his own mother to protect his empire. What would he do to me? So I stayed quiet, stayed close, and waited. Waited for you to grow strong enough to bring him down. Your grandmother believed you would. It's the last thing she told me. Alethea will make it right. The golf buddies were already moving, heading for the door with mumbled excuses about early meetings and family obligations. I let them go. They'd be back tomorrow for the board meeting, or their lawyers would. None of this can be proven, my father said desperately. It's hearsay speculation. Any decent lawyer would tear it apart. Maybe, I conceded, but combined with everything else, the embezzlement, the fraud, the bigamy, the stolen patents, it paints quite a picture, the kind of picture that ends with handcuffs and headlines. Madison suddenly laughed high and hysterical. This is insane, all of it. My husband married me as a business deal. My father is a murderer. My sister isn't my sister. My mother isn't my mother. What else? What other bombs are you going to drop? Just one more, I said, pulling out my phone. Bradley, I know you haven't left yet. You're sitting in your car in the driveway, aren't you? You might want to come back in for this part. The front door opened 30 seconds later. Bradley walked in, his face grim. How did you know? Because you're smart enough to realize the FBI wasn't done with just you and your father. There's more to this story, isn't there? More to the deal between our fathers. He nodded slowly. The marriage was just part of it. The real deal was bigger, darker. Tell them I encouraged. Bradley looked at Madison, real anguish in his eyes. Your father didn't just owe my father money. He owed other people. Dangerous people. The kind who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse. The Calabrese family, I supplied. One of the last old-school organizations still operating in international finance. They dress it up with legitimate businesses, but underneath they're the same thugs who used to break kneecaps in Brooklyn. How do you know about them? My father asked, though he looked like he already regretted the question. Because I've been paying them off for the last 18 months, I said simply. $500,000 a month transferred through intermediaries. Did you think your debts just magically disappeared, Dad? That they forgot about the $40 million you owed them? Helen made a choking sound. $40 million to criminals. Structured as legitimate business loans, of course, I explained. Hidden behind shell companies and offshore banks. But when you can't pay, they don't foreclose on your house. They foreclose on your life. You've been protecting him, Madison asked, incredulous. After everything he's done, I've been protecting all of you, I corrected. They wouldn't stop with him. The Calabrese family believes in collective punishment. Wives, children, anyone connected to the debt. So yes, I've been paying your father's blood money to keep you all breathing. But Madison turned to Bradley. You knew about this. Bradley nodded miserably. My father brokered the original loans. He takes a percentage of every payment. It's why he pushed so hard for the marriage. He needed the Morrison connection to stay legitimate while being deep in bed with organized crime. And now the FBI is investigating, I added, following the money trail from Morrison Industries to Thornton Equity to the Calabrese family. Years of RICO predicates all tied up with a neat bow. You set us all up, my father said, understanding finally dawning. The takeover, the FBI investigation, revealing all the secrets tonight. You're burning down everything to destroy me. Wrong, I said. I'm cauterizing a wound that's been festering for 35 years. Morrison Industries will survive under new leadership. The innocent employees will keep their jobs. The criminals will go to prison where they belong. And us, Helen asked, what happens to your family? You were never my family. I said, then softened at the pain in her eyes. That's not fair. You did your best with an impossible situation. Helen, you'll be taken care of. There's a settlement prepared enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. The divorce can be quiet, dignified. You can finally be free of him. And Madison. I looked at my sister, the golden child who'd gotten everything while I got contempt. Madison has choices to make. The money she stole is gone spent on trivial luxuries. But she's young, educated, capable of building something real if she's willing to work for it. The divorce from Bradley will include a settlement from his family's legitimate assets. Enough for a fresh start. I don't want his money, Madison said quietly. Not anymore. Bradley reached for her hand, then thought better of it. For what it's worth, the feelings became real. The marriage might have started as a lie, but I did fall in love with you. She pulled away from him. How can I believe anything you say? You can't, he admitted. That's what happens when everything is built on lies. Trust becomes impossible. Speaking of lies, I said, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Madison, tell them about Sarah. Madison went rigid. What? Sarah Chen, your college roommate, the one you've been secretly dating for 2 years, the one you actually married in Vermont last summer, the one currently receiving cancer treatment in Switzerland that I've been anonymously funding. The room exploded again. Bradley stared at his wife in shock. Helen gasped. My father, still on the floor, looked like he'd been slapped. You're gay, Bradley's voice came out strangled. I'm bisexual, Madison corrected quietly. And yes, I'm legally married to Sarah, have been for 14 months. But our wedding was never valid, I confirmed, making the entire business arrangement moot. No legal marriage means no merger between the families, no board seats for Thornton Equity, no claim on Morrison assets. You knew, Madison asked me, how long? Since the day you got married. Sarah's oncologist needed insurance information for her treatment. She listed you as her spouse. The hospital contacted me as the anonymous donor to verify the relationship. Why didn't you say anything? Because it wasn't my secret to tell, and because I wanted to see what you'd do, whether you'd come clean on your own or keep living the lie. Madison started crying again, but these tears seemed different, cleaner somehow. I was so scared. Daddy always said he'd disown any child who embarrassed the family that way. Called it an abomination, said he'd rather have a dead daughter than a gay one. He says a lot of things, I observed. Most of them cruel, all of them designed to control. But here's the thing, Madison. He has no power anymore. No money to hold over your head, no reputation to threaten, no company to inherit. You're free. Sarah doesn't know about any of this, Madison said. The family money, the fake marriage, none of it. I told her I was working as a consultant, that my family was middle class. I wanted her to love me for me, not for the Morrison name. Smart, I acknowledged. Maybe you learned something from watching me after all. This is disgusting, my father spat from his position on the floor. All of you, perverts and criminals and Richard Morrison. I said, my voice cutting through his tirade like a sword through silk. You are a bigamist, embezzler, thief, and murderer. You have forfeited any right to judge anyone else's choices. One more word, and I'll have Dorothy call her FBI contact right now." He shut his mouth. "So where does this leave us?" Helen asked. "Everything is destroyed. Every relationship, every trust, every foundation we built our lives on." "Not destroyed," I said. "Revealed. The lies were always there, rotting beneath the surface. Now they're in the light where they can be dealt with." "And then what?" Madison asked. "We all just walk away, pretend we were never a family?" "We were never a family," I repeated. "We were a business arrangement masquerading as one. But that doesn't mean we can't build something real from the ashes." Dorothy stood gathering her purse and the evidence she'd kept hidden for so long. "I'll be at the federal building first thing in the morning. It's time to give my statement about Mother's death. 35 years too late, but better than never." "Dorothy." My father pleaded, "Please, think about what you're doing." She paused at the doorway, looking back at him with decades of suppressed anger finally showing. "I have thought about it. Every day for 35 years. Every time I visited Mother's grave. Every time I saw Alethea fighting for scraps of approval you'd never give. I've thought about nothing else." She left, and the fight seemed to go out of my father completely. He sat on the floor like a broken puppet, all his strings cut. "There's one thing I don't understand," Bradley said. "If you've been protecting us from the Calabrese family paying off the debts, why reveal it all now? Why not just take over quietly?" "Because secrets are cancer," I said. "They metastasize, spread, consume everything healthy around them. Catherine knew that when she tried to fight back. Grandmother knew it when she wrote her letter. Dorothy knew it all these years. The only way to heal is to cut out the tumor completely." "Even if it kills the patient?" Helen asked. "Morrison Industries will survive. The family—" I shrugged. "That was dead long before tonight. I'm just performing the autopsy." My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and smiled. "Speaking of which, the FBI will be here in approximately 20 minutes. They have warrants for Dad and some questions for everyone else. I suggest you all prepare your statements carefully. Tell the truth as novel as that concept might be in this house." "You called them?" Madison asked. "No, Dorothy did. About an hour ago, right after Bradley showed up. She's been wearing a wire all evening. Every confession, every revelation, all recorded for posterity." "Entrapment," my father muttered from the floor. "Documentation," I corrected, "of crimes you committed freely over decades. No one made you steal, lie, or murder. Those were your choices." I gathered my purse, checking that all my documents were accounted for. The physical evidence would go to the FBI, but I had digital copies of everything. Years of preparation distilled into a single evening of truth. "Where are you going?" Madison asked as I headed for the door. "Back to my real life," I said. "The one I built honestly without stealing or lying or stepping on others. Tomorrow morning I'll take control of Morrison Industries and start the long process of making things right. But tonight I'm going home." "Alethea," Helen called after me. Will we see you again after all this?" I paused at the threshold of the house I'd grown up in but never felt at home in. "That depends on what you do with the truth, whether you let it destroy you or whether you use it to build something better. And if we choose to build," Madison asked, her voice small but hopeful, "then you know where to find me. The Gilded Lily every Tuesday and Friday night. I'll be the one behind the bar pouring drinks and listening to stories, real stories from people who've learned that honesty is the only foundation worth building on." I left them there in the wreckage of their lies, walking out into the cool night air that smelled like freedom and justice and new beginnings. Behind me, I could hear sirens approaching, the sound of consequences finally coming home. My phone rang as I reached my car. Unknown number, but I'd been expecting this call. "Hello," I said. "Hello, Alethea." The voice was older, weathered by years and distance, but I'd have recognized it anywhere. It was the voice from my dreams, from half-remembered lullabies and whispered bedtime stories. "Hello, Mom," I said to Catherine Walsh, the brilliant woman who'd been declared dead for 35 years. I think it's time we finally met. Where are you? My mother's voice carried across 3 decades of separation, each word weighted with emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. Leaving the Morrison house, the FBI should be arriving any moment. I slid into my Tesla, a far cry from the ancient Honda I'd driven here. Where are you? Closer than you think. I've been in Boston for 3 days waiting for tonight. A pause heavy with unspoken words. I'm proud of you, Alethea. What you did in there, what you've built. You're everything I hoped you'd become. I learned from your work, I said, starting the engine. Your real work, not the scraps he left in the public record. Aunt Dorothy gave me access to your papers 5 years ago. Dorothy. Catherine's voice warmed. She kept her promise. I wasn't sure she would after so long. She never forgot. None of them did, really. They just buried it under years of complicity and fear. I pulled out of the driveway as the first police cars turned onto the street. Can we meet tonight? Tomorrow, she said. After you've taken the company, after he's in custody. There are things you need to know, but tonight isn't the time. You have a sister to save. Madison. I frowned. She made her choices. She made the only choices she could see. You had Dorothy and your grandmother's faith. Madison had nothing but Richard's poison. Give her a chance to surprise you. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment, then tucked it away. Catherine Walsh had survived 35 years in hiding. One more night wouldn't matter. I'd driven 3 blocks when my phone rang again. Madison's number. They're here, she said without preamble. The FBI, they're arresting Daddy. He's crying, Alethea. I've never seen him cry. Where's Bradley? Talking to the agents, cooperating. He gave them a box of documents from his car. Said he'd been collecting evidence once he realized what his father had gotten them into. Her voice cracked. Everything's falling apart. No, I corrected. Everything's becoming clear. There's a difference. Can I see you? Not at the house. Somewhere else. I need to tell you something. I considered for a moment. Catherine's words echoed, give her a chance to surprise you. The Gilded Lily in an hour, I said. Come alone. Sarah's with me. That stopped me. Sarah's in Boston. I thought she was in Switzerland. She flew back 2 days ago. The treatment's working, but she couldn't stand being away during... Madison paused. She knew something big was happening. She always knows. It's like she can read my mind. Bring her, I decided. It's time I met my sister-in-law properly. 50 minutes later, I stood behind the bar at the Gilded Lily, the first business I'd ever owned outright. The late-night crowd was thin. A few regulars nursing whiskeys, a couple on what looked like a last-chance date, 2 writers in the corner debating semicolons. This was why I still tended bar for the peace of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Madison entered first hesitant, looking around like she'd never been in a bar before. Knowing our father, she probably hadn't been allowed. Behind her came a woman who could only be Sarah Chen. She was smaller than I'd expected, delicate-looking in the way that made people underestimate her. But her eyes were sharp, intelligent, taking in everything at once. The wheelchair I'd seen in photos was gone, replaced by a cane. She leaned on lightly. Cancer had taken weight from her frame, but hadn't touched the steel in her spine. You must be Alethea, Sarah said, extending her hand. I've wanted to meet you for years. Madison talks about you constantly. Does she? I shook her hand, noting the firm grip. All bad, I assume. All complicated, Sarah corrected, which is usually more interesting than simple good or bad. I liked her immediately. Madison stood awkwardly between us, wringing her hands. Can we sit somewhere private? I led them to my office above the bar, a space that was more home than any house had ever been. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights twinkling like ground-level stars. I poured myself water, offered them the same. I don't drink, Sarah said. Interferes with the medication. Madison doesn't either, in solidarity. You told her about the payments, Madison said without preamble, that you've been funding Sarah's treatment. You didn't— I raised an eyebrow. I couldn't figure out how to explain knowing about anonymous donations without revealing everything else. Madison slumped in her chair. I've been lying so long I forgot what truth feels like. Start now, Sarah suggested gently. Tell her what you told me on the way over. Madison took a shaky breath. I knew about Catherine Walsh. Not everything, but enough. I was 16 when I found the papers in Daddy's safe. The real patents, the original algorithms. I confronted him. This was unexpected. And he said Catherine was a gold digger who'd tried to steal his work, that she'd abandoned her baby when her scheme failed, that you were better off not knowing your mother was a con artist who'd used pregnancy to try to trap him. You believed him. I was 16 and terrified. He was my hero, the great Richard Morrison, who'd built an empire. Why would he lie? She laughed bitterly. Then I met Sarah freshman year at Yale. She was studying investigative journalism, always talking about following the money, exposing corruption. She made me see things differently. Madison started researching Catherine Walsh. Sarah picked up the story. Quietly, carefully. The more she found, the more her father's story fell apart. By senior year, she knew he was lying, but she was trapped. Trapped how I asked, though I suspected the answer. Financial aid forms, Madison said. Daddy made too much for need-based aid but refused to pay for college if I studied anything but business. Said journalism was for bleeding hearts and losers. I had to take out private loans, credit cards. By graduation, I owed over $200,000. Which is when the trust fund conveniently appeared, I said. Madison nodded miserably. He came to graduation with the papers. Said grandmother had left me everything that I was set for life. All I had to do was keep the family secrets and play the perfect daughter. But you knew it was my money. I knew. God, Alethea, I knew, and I took it anyway. I told myself you were doing fine, that you didn't need it, that I could do good with it, help people. She looked at Sarah. When we started dating, I had this fantasy. I'd use the money to start an investigative journalism foundation, expose corruption, help whistleblowers, turn the dirty money clean. Instead, I got scared. Daddy kept demanding I attend events, maintain appearances. Every time I tried to pull away, he'd threaten to expose Sarah and me. Said he'd ruin her career before it started. So I spent the money on the things he expected: designer clothes, charity galas, the wedding to Bradley. Madison didn't know about the criminal connections, Sarah interjected. She thought it was just family drama and financial impropriety. If she'd known about the Calabrese family, I'd have run, Madison finished, taken Sarah and disappeared. But I was too deep in the lies to see the truth. I studied them both. Madison, the golden child who'd been slowly drowning in guilt. Sarah, the outsider who'd seen through the facade but loved Madison anyway. Tell me about Vermont, I said. They exchanged glances. Sarah smiled. June 23rd last year. Tiny ceremony in Burlington. My parents' 2 friends from college and a justice of the peace who made us cry with her vows about truth being the foundation of love. I wanted to invite you, Madison said quietly. Sarah insisted we should, but I was terrified you'd expose everything out of spite. I wouldn't have come, I admitted, but not out of spite, because I was playing a longer game. The takeover, Sarah said. Madison figured out something was happening when Morrison Industries stock started moving strangely. She has a good eye for patterns, probably from watching your father manipulate markets for so long. Why didn't you leave then? I asked Madison. You must have realized it would end badly. Because of this. Madison pulled out her phone, showed me a message thread. Threats started coming 3 months ago, not to me, to Sarah. Photos of her at the hospital, at home, at work. Messages saying they knew about the marriage, about the money. If I tried to leave, they'd hurt her. I took the phone, scrolled through the messages. Professional quality surveillance photos, carefully worded threats that skirted legal lines. The Calabrese family. That's what I figured out tonight, Madison said. When you mentioned them, it all clicked. They must have known Daddy's empire was crumbling. They were using me as insurance. Which is why you came back from Switzerland, I said to Sarah. Not because you sensed something, but because they threatened to hurt Madison if you didn't. Sarah nodded. They wanted us both where they could watch us, control us. I handed back the phone. They won't be a problem anymore. The FBI raids happening tonight include several Calabrese operations. Your father and Bradley's father gave them enough to act on in exchange for reduced sentences. Reduced? Madison's voice rose. After everything they've done, white-collar crime and organized crime have different sentences. They'll serve time, but not life, unless Dorothy's testimony about grandmother holds up. Murder has no statute of limitations. He killed her. Madison's statement held no surprise, only resignation. Part of me always suspected. The way he'd change the subject if anyone mentioned her death. The way Helen would flinch at her name. What will you do now? I asked. The trust fund's gone. The Morrison name will be toxic. Bradley's filing for divorce, which you wanted anyway. You're free but broke. We've talked about it, Sarah said. I've been offered a position at the Washington Post, investigative team focusing on financial crimes. The pay's not much, but it's honest work. And I asked Madison. I don't know. She met my eyes for the first time all evening. I've been pretending for so long I don't know who I really am, but I want to find out. Maybe start with apologizing. To you, to Helen, to everyone I hurt by staying silent. Apologies are words, I said. What matters is what you do next. What would you have me do? I considered. The FBI will need witnesses. People who can explain the financial structures, the family dynamics. You lived in that house for 28 years. You know where bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. You want me to testify against our father. I want you to tell the truth, all of it, even the parts that make you look bad. Especially those parts, Sarah added. Truth is like chemotherapy. It hurts like hell, but it's the only thing that kills the cancer. Madison laughed, surprising all of us. You know what the really sick part is? I'm relieved. 28 years of suffocating and I can finally breathe. Is that wrong? That's human, I said. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening settling around us like dust after an explosion. Outside, Boston glittered, unaware that one of its oldest dynasties had just imploded. There's something else, Madison said eventually. About Mom. Helen, I mean. What about her? She's been having an affair for 15 years with her personal trainer, Marcus. She told me last year when she was drunk at Christmas, said it was the only real happiness she'd had since marrying Daddy. I thought about Helen, the perfect corporate wife who'd raised another woman's child while her husband built an empire on lies. Good for her. You're not angry. Why would I be she deserved something real in all that performance art? I stood, signaling the conversation was winding down. What will you tell the FBI? Everything, Madison said firmly, starting with finding those patents when I was 16. Maybe if I'd spoken up then. You were a child, Sarah interrupted. He was your father. You did what you had to do to survive. Survival's not living, Madison countered. Alethea proved that. She didn't just survive, she thrived. I had advantages you didn't, I admitted. Distance from him, Dorothy's support, grandmother's faith, and most importantly, I had Catherine's work to study. Her brilliance gave me a roadmap. Will you meet her? Madison asked suddenly. Catherine, I mean, if she's really alive. Tomorrow. Are you scared? I considered lying, then decided we'd had enough of those for one lifetime. Terrified. I've built my entire identity around being the daughter of a brilliant woman who died tragically. What if the reality doesn't match the myth? What if it's better? Sarah suggested. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Dorothy. He's in custody, she reported, charged with embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and pending investigation for murder. Bradley's cooperating fully. His father was arrested in Connecticut. Helen's with my lawyer filing for emergency divorce and asset protection. And the company? Trading suspended pending tomorrow's board meeting. The financial press is having a field day. Morrison empire built on murder and lies, not the legacy he envisioned. No, I agreed, but maybe the one he deserved. I hung up and looked at Madison and Sarah, my sister and sister-in-law, the family I'd never expected to have. You should disappear for a while, I told them. The press will be brutal and the Calabrese family might have people the FBI missed. I have a cabin in Vermont, very private. You could stay there until things calm down. Why would you help us? Madison asked. After everything... Because, I said, pouring myself a scotch despite rarely drinking, Catherine told me to give you a chance to surprise me, and you have. The Madison I knew would never have admitted the truth, never have risked everything for love, never have chosen honesty over money. The Madison you knew never existed, she replied. She was just another performance in the Morrison family theater. Then I look forward to meeting the real one, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings, and to endings that were long overdue. They left shortly after hand in hand, heading into an uncertain future that was at least honestly theirs. I stayed in my office watching the city sleep, waiting for dawn and the final act of our family drama. Tomorrow I'd take Morrison Industries and transform it from a monument to theft into something worthy of Catherine Walsh's genius. Tomorrow I'd meet my mother and learn what kind of woman could fake her own death and wait 35 years for justice. Tomorrow I'd begin building something true on the ashes of lies. But tonight, I poured another scotch and toasted the ghost's Catherine, whose brilliance started it all. Grandmother who'd tried to make it right. Dorothy who'd kept the faith. Even Richard, whose cruelty had forged me into someone strong enough to destroy him. Thank you, I said to the empty room, for teaching me that the truth, like whiskey, is best served neat. The city glittered below, indifferent to the fall of dynasties and the rise of truth. Somewhere out there, my father sat in a federal holding cell, his empire in ruins. Somewhere, my mother waited to meet the daughter she'd been forced to abandon. Somewhere, Madison and Sarah drove toward a future free of lies. And here in the office above the bar where I'd built my first honest success, I sat with the weight of tomorrow on my shoulders and found it lighter than the lies I'd finally set down. The gilded lily hummed with late-night life below me. Real people living real lives, unaware their bartender had just orchestrated the destruction of $1 billion empire. That was the beauty of truth. It didn't need an audience to be powerful. My phone rang one more time. Unknown number again. Get some sleep, Catherine said without preamble. Tomorrow will be long. I don't sleep much, I admitted. Haven't for years. Neither do I. Conscience makes for a poor bedfellow. A pause. I'm proud of you, Alethea. You did what I couldn't. You started it, I pointed out. The divorce papers, the patents, the evidence. You lit the fuse 35 years ago. And you had the courage to let it burn. Not everyone would have. Madison wouldn't have. Madison surprised me tonight. Good. The world needs more good surprises. Another pause. I'll see you tomorrow, after the board meeting. There's a cafe on Newberry Street, the Blue Rose. I'll be in the back booth. How will I recognize you? She laughed, the sound like music I'd forgotten I knew. Trust me, daughter, you'll know. The line went dead. I finished my scotch, turned off the lights, and headed home to not sleep. Tomorrow would come whether I rested or not, bringing with it new battles and old ghosts. But tonight had proven one thing. Truth like morning always comes, and when it does, it burns away everything that can't withstand the light. The boardroom at Morrison Industries occupied the entire 40th floor, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Boston that was meant to intimidate. This morning, with storm clouds gathering over the harbor, it felt more like a stage set for Judgment Day. I arrived at 6:30, 30 minutes before the emergency meeting. The security guard who'd worked the desk for 20 years did a double take when I walked in. Miss Morrison, I didn't expect. With everything that's happened... Good morning, Frank. I handed him a coffee from the shop downstairs, the same order he'd gotten every day according to the receipts I'd studied. Medium dark roast, 2 sugars, splash of cream, though you might need something stronger today. His eyes widened. How did you... I pay attention. It's what good leaders do. I headed for the executive elevator. Oh, and Frank, after today you'll be reporting to me. Your job is safe. Can't say the same for most of the 40th floor. The elevator rose smoothly, carrying me toward a confrontation decades in the making. I dressed carefully, a black suit that meant business grandmother's pearl necklace for strength and Catherine's watch that Dorothy had saved for me. Armor made of memories. The boardroom was empty when I entered, but not for long. Harold Westbrook arrived first, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. His usual confident swagger had been replaced by the careful movements of a man walking through a minefield. Alethea. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. I suppose congratulations are in order, or condolences. I'm not sure which fits. Neither, I said, taking my place at the far end of the table. Not the head that would come later. This isn't a celebration or a funeral, it's a reckoning. James Chen entered next, followed by Roberto Vasquez. Both looked haggard, probably from late-night conferences with their lawyers. The other board members trickled in Patricia Holbrook, whose family had held shares for 3 generations. David Steinberg, the supposed independent director who'd rubber-stamped every one of my father's schemes. Monica Williams, the sole woman besides Patricia, and the only one who'd ever questioned the books. At 6:55, my father's lawyer, Harrison Blackwood, entered with a thick folder and a grim expression. Mr. Morrison won't be attending, obviously. He's asked me to represent his interests. His interests? I smiled. What interests would those be? He owns 19% of the company as of this morning. I own 51. His interests are whatever I say they are. The family trust has been diluted by his illegal stock issuances, which the SEC is now investigating. I pulled out my tablet displaying the ownership breakdown. Would you like to challenge the mathematics, Harrison? Though I should warn you, the FBI is very interested in your role in certain document alterations, specifically the ones involving my grandmother's trust. He sat down without another word. At exactly 7, I stood. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. As majority shareholder of Morrison Industries, I call this emergency meeting to order. First item, the immediate removal of Richard Morrison as CEO and chairman. You can't just herald started. I can and I am, all in favor. Monica Williams raised her hand immediately. After a moment, Patricia Holbrook followed. One by one, the rest fell in line. Even Harold, seeing the inevitable, raised his hand. Motion carried, I announced. Second item, the appointment of interim leadership. I nominate myself as CEO and chairman. This is highly irregular, Blackwood protested. There are procedures, searches, committees. There's also a company hemorrhaging value and under federal investigation, I countered. We need leadership now, not in 6 months. All in favor. This vote took longer, but the result was the same. They had no choice. I controlled the majority shares, and the FBI had enough evidence to charge anyone who'd been complicit in the fraud. Motion carried. Now let's discuss the real reason we're here. I moved to the presentation screen, pulling up files I'd prepared. Morrison Industries is built on a foundation of theft, fraud, and murder. Today we begin the process of making that right. Murder. David Steinberg's voice cracked. What are you talking about? Dorothy Morrison gave a statement to the FBI last night. She has evidence that Richard Morrison murdered his mother to prevent her from exposing his crimes. But that's just the latest in a pattern of destroying anyone who threatened his empire. I clicked through to the next slide, Catherine Walsh's photograph, the same one from my father's hidden folder, but enhanced and restored. Dr. Catherine Walsh, brilliant economist, the real creator of the Morrison algorithm, my biological mother, supposedly died of cancer in 1990. Except, I clicked again. She didn't. The room erupted. I let them shout and argue for a moment before raising my hand for silence. The FBI has been in contact with someone claiming to be Catherine Walsh. She's been feeding them information about Morrison Industries for years. Small things at first, breadcrumbs that led nowhere. But recently, she provided something more substantial. Another click. Financial records appear dense with numbers and transactions. Proof that Richard Morrison has been using the company to launder money for the Calabrese crime family. 20 years of transactions hidden in legitimate trades. The algorithm Catherine created perverted into a tool for criminals. "This is insane," Harold protested. "We would have known. The audits were performed by firms that Richard carefully selected and generously compensated." Monica Williams spoke up. "I tried to insist on rotating auditors 5 years ago. The board voted me down. Now we know why." The FBI estimates the total laundered through Morrison Industries at over $300 million. I continued. Every board member who signed off on suspicious transactions could be held liable, unless what? Patricia asked, though she looked like she already knew. "Unless you cooperate fully. Vote for complete transparency. Open the books to forensic accounting. Return the stolen patents to their rightful owner." I paused. "And support the merger with Prometheus Innovations." "Merger?" James's voice pitched high. "You want us to hand over the company to your startup?" "I want to save what can be saved," I corrected. Morrison Industries' legitimate operations, the ones not connected to crime, can be folded into Prometheus. The technology properly attributed to Catherine Walsh can be used for its intended purpose, predicting market trends, to help small investors, not enabling criminal enterprises. "And if we refuse," Roberto asked, "then you explain to the FBI why you voted to continue criminal operations. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your reasoning." Blackwood cleared his throat. "There's the matter of the murder allegation. Dorothy Morrison's claims about her mother's death. The board can't be asked to make decisions under the cloud of such accusations." "You're right," I agreed, "which is why I've invited a special guest to address that very issue." The boardroom door opened. Dorothy entered looking every inch the Morrison matriarch in her severe black suit. But she wasn't alone. A younger woman followed mid-30s carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of expression that suggested she ate corporate lawyers for breakfast. "This is Assistant United States Attorney Samantha Chen," Dorothy announced. "And yes, before anyone asks, she's Sarah Chen's older sister. Funny how connections work out." The board collectively paled. Having the prosecutor handling their case related to Madison's secret wife was the kind of conflict they'd have exploited themselves. Now it was working against them. "Ms. Chen is here as an observer," I clarified, "to ensure our discussions remain within legal bounds. Dorothy, would you like to share what you told the FBI?" Dorothy moved to the center of the room, commanding attention despite her diminutive stature. "On June 15, 1990, I witnessed my nephew Richard leave my mother's house at 3:17 in the morning. Later that day, I found empty vials of her heart medication in his car. Vials that, according to the pharmacy records I've since obtained, were filled 3 days after her regular prescription should have run out." "Speculation," Blackwood said weakly. "Evidence," Dorothy corrected, "which I've preserved for 35 years, including this." She pulled out the plastic-wrapped suicide note. Even through the evidence bag, Grandmother's handwriting was clearly visible. "Mother wrote this the night she died. It details Richard's crimes, the theft of Catherine's work, the bigamy, the plans to steal Alethea's inheritance. She couldn't live with the shame of what her son had become." "If she committed suicide," Harold began. "She didn't." Dorothy's voice cut like ice. "The note was her insurance policy. She hid it knowing Richard might try something. The digoxin levels in her blood were 3 times the fatal dose. No one accidentally takes that much, and someone committing suicide doesn't hide the note where only I would find it." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Monica asked. Dorothy's composure cracked slightly. "I was 35 years old, a single woman with no power and no protection. Richard had just murdered his own mother. What do you think he would have done to me?" She straightened. But I waited, watched, collected evidence, waited for Alethea to grow strong enough to face him. My mother believed her granddaughter would set things right. She was correct. AUSA Chen spoke for the first time. The federal government is prepared to charge Richard Morrison with murder, along with numerous financial crimes. The board's cooperation in the restructuring will be taken into consideration during sentencing discussions for any peripheral involvement. The threat was clear play ball or join Richard in federal prison. I need to make a call, Harold said desperately. My lawyer... Sit down, I commanded. We're not finished. Patricia, you've been on this board the longest. Tell me about the Walsh patents. Patricia Holbrook, 70 years old and tough as nails, looked at me with something like respect. I remember Catherine, brilliant woman. She'd come to board meetings in the early days, present these incredible analyses. Then one day, Richard announced she'd left the company due to health issues. Her work became his work. We all knew something was off, but the profits were so good. You chose money over justice. We chose stability over scandal. It was a different time. It was 1990, not 1890, Monica interjected. We knew it was wrong. We just didn't care enough to risk our positions. Well, now you get to make a different choice, I said. Vote to return the patents to Catherine Walsh or her designated heir. Vote to merge with Prometheus under new leadership. Vote to open the books to full investigation. Or vote to go down with Richard Morrison. And if Catherine Walsh is really alive, David asked, what happens then? Then she gets what was always hers, I said simply. Recognition, restitution, justice. This is extortion, Blackwood protested. This is consequence, I corrected. Something this board has avoided for too long. The vote when it came was unanimous. Even Blackwood, seeing the writing on the wall, advised the board to accept my terms. Within an hour, we'd passed resolutions that dismantled my father's empire and began building something new on its foundation. As the board members filed out, subdued and shaken, Monica Williams lingered. I should have pushed harder, asked more questions. I'm sorry. Apologies are easy, I told her. What matters is what you do next. What would you have me do? Stay on the board. Be the voice of dissent. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Make sure this never happens again. She nodded and left. Only Dorothy AUSA Chen and I remained in the boardroom that had seen so many of my father's victories. He'll fight this, Chen warned. Murder charges based on 35-year-old evidence won't be easy to prove. He won't fight, Dorothy said with certainty. Richard is many things, but he's not stupid. He'll take a plea deal rather than risk a trial where all his sins are laid bare. 25 to life. 15 to 20 probably. He's an old man with health issues. His lawyers will play that card. Dorothy gathered her things. It's enough. He'll die in prison either way. After they left, I stood at the windows looking out over the city my father had tried to conquer through lies and theft. In a few hours, I'd meet Catherine Walsh, the ghost who'd haunted our family for decades. Tomorrow, the newspapers would chronicle the fall of the Morrison Empire. Next week, the real work of rebuilding would begin. My phone buzzed. A message from Madison. Saw the news. The board voted. You did it. We all did it, I replied. Even him in the end. He created the very weapon that destroyed me. Poetic justice. Just justice. The poetic part is that he'll have years in a cell to think about it. I left the boardroom as the storm finally broke over Boston rain, washing the city clean. It felt appropriate. Morrison Industries was dead. Something better would grow from its corpse, nourished by truth instead of lies. The security guard nodded as I passed. Have a good day, Ms. Morrison. It's Ms. Walsh, I corrected gently. Alethea Walsh. I'll be changing it legally next week. He smiled. Have a good day, Ms. Walsh, and thank you for the coffee. Thank you, Frank, for 20 years of service. Things are going to be different now. Better. I stepped out into the rain, letting it soak through my expensive suit. Somewhere across the city, Catherine waited in a cafe. My mother, the brilliant woman whose work built an empire, whose disappearance shaped a family, whose patience orchestrated justice. It was time to meet her, time to close the circle that began with theft and end it with truth. The city washed clean around me as I walked toward my future, leaving the Morrison name to die in the storm. The Blue Rose Cafe sat tucked between a bookstore and an art gallery on Newberry Street, the kind of place that served $8 lattes and attracted writers who nursed single drinks for hours. I stood across the street, rain still falling, watching the windows fog with warmth and conversation. 35 years of separation were about to end with a conversation over coffee. I entered at exactly 9:30, scanning the room with habits born from years of careful observation. Business types grabbed quick espressos before heading to offices that would be buzzing with news of Morrison Industries' implosion. Students hunched over laptops, oblivious to the drama playing out in their midst. And in the back booth, as promised, sat a woman who could only be Catherine Walsh. She'd aged, of course. The dark hair from photographs had gone silver cut short in a style that suggested practicality over vanity. But the eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes that had seen patterns in chaos and built algorithms from intuition, those were exactly the same. She was reading a newspaper, the Financial Times, and sipping tea from a delicate china cup. I approached slowly, giving us both time to adjust to the moment. She looked up when I was 3 feet away, and her composure cracked just slightly. A tremor in her hands quickly suppressed, a shine in her eyes that might have been tears. Alethea. My name on her lips sounded like a prayer answered after decades of silence. Catherine. I couldn't quite manage Mom yet. Maybe later, maybe never. She gestured to the seat across from her. I ordered you coffee, dark roast, no sugar, splash of oat milk. I hope that's still how you take it. How did you know? A small smile. I've been watching when I could. Not closely enough to interfere with your life, but enough to know my daughter builds her empire on coffee and determination. I sat wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Where have you been? Many places. Montreal, first teaching under an assumed name, then Vancouver, Singapore, briefly London. Always moving, always watching over my shoulder. Did you know paranoia can become a kind of companion? After a while, you almost miss it when it's gone. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Because Richard would have destroyed you. Her voice carried absolute certainty. You were a child, then a young woman finding her way. If he'd known I was alive, if he'd thought you were in contact with me, he would have crushed you before you could grow strong enough to fight back. So you waited. I waited, the hardest thing I've ever done, including faking my own death. She set down her teacup with precise movements. Tell me about Dorothy. Is she well? She's strong. She kept your papers safe, guided me when she could. She testified against him last night. Brave woman. I owe her more than I can repay. She said she was repaying a debt to grandmother. Catherine's expression darkened. Eleanor, I heard about her death years later. The timing was suspicious. He killed her. Dorothy saw him leave the house. She found the empty medication vials. Of course he did. Catherine's voice held no surprise, only weary acceptance. She was going to expose him. When I sent her the evidence about the stolen patents, she promised to make it right. I should have known he'd silence her first. Why fake your death? I asked. You were building a case. The divorce papers showed you were fighting back. Because I was losing. She pulled out a folder. Everyone in this family seemed to carry evidence like others carried phone chargers. The cancer was real, stage 2 pancreatic, but treatable with early detection. I was going to beat it. Then things started happening. She spread papers across the table, medical records, police reports, insurance claims. My oncologist died in a car accident. Single vehicle, perfect weather, no explanation. My lawyer's office burned down with all my files inside. The journalist I'd been talking to about the patent theft had a heart attack at 32. Healthy man, no history of cardiac issues. You think he killed them all? I know he did. Maybe not personally, but Richard had already made connections with people who specialized in solving problems permanently. When my brakes failed twice in 1 week, I knew I had two choices: disappear or die for real. So you chose to vanish. With help. There was a network for women escaping dangerous situations. They helped me create a new identity, stage my death, start over. The hardest part was leaving you behind. Her voice broke slightly. You were 2 years old, just starting to talk in full sentences. Your first word was, why fitting, really. I don't remember you at all, I admitted. I know, that was the point. If you didn't remember me, you couldn't miss me. Couldn't accidentally reveal something that would make Richard suspicious. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. May I? I nodded and she covered my hand with hers. Her touch was warm, tentative, carrying the weight of lost decades. I'm proud of you, she said. What you built, how you built it. You took the gift I gave you, that mind for patterns and numbers, and created something I never could have imagined. I had advantages you didn't. Distance from him. Time to prepare. You had disadvantages too. No mother to guide you. A father who saw you as disappointment. A sister raised to compete rather than connect. She squeezed my hand gently. Yet you thrived. That's not advantage. That's character. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Madison calling. I should take this, I said. Catherine nodded. Family first. I learned that too late. Madison, I answered. Alethea, thank God. Her voice was strained. Are you somewhere safe, somewhere public? Yes, why? Don't go home. Don't go to your office. The FBI just called Sarah. They intercepted communications suggesting, God, I can't believe I'm saying this. Someone put a hit out on you. My blood chilled. Who? They're not sure. Could be the Calabreses, could be someone else. But it's credible enough that they're taking it seriously. They want you in protective custody until they figure it out. I looked at Catherine, who'd gone rigid at my change in expression. I'll call you back, I told Madison. I'm safe where I am. I hung up and was about to explain when Catherine spoke first. Threats. Apparently someone wants me dead. The FBI intercepted communications. Not someone, Catherine said grimly. Richard. Even from jail, he's trying to solve his problems the permanent way. You think he'd actually try to kill you? He killed his own mother. Tried to kill me multiple times. You just destroyed everything he built. Of course he wants you dead. She pulled out her phone, dialed quickly. It's me. Yes, she's here. We have a problem. Credible threat, FBI confirmed. I need a full team. Yes, now. Who is that? I asked. Friends. People who've been helping me stay hidden for 35 years. They'll keep us safe until this is resolved. Catherine. I said carefully, what kind of friends have private security on speed dial? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The kind you make when you've been feeding information to multiple government agencies about financial crimes for 3 decades. I wasn't just hiding Alethea. I was working, building cases, tracking money, helping authorities understand the systems I created that criminals perverted. You've been a federal informant this whole time. Informant, analyst, consultant. Whatever they needed. It kept me useful, which kept me protected. And it let me watch Richard's empire grow, documenting every crime, waiting for the right moment. Which was me. Which was you. She signaled the barista for more tea. I knew eventually he'd create his own destroyer. Men like Richard always do. Their arrogance becomes their weakness. He raised you to be smart enough to help him, but never considered you might be smart enough to beat him. A black SUV pulled up outside. 3 people got out, all wearing the kind of suits that suggested concealed weapons and government training. Our ride, Catherine announced. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, where we can talk properly without wondering if someone's about to put a bullet through the window. We left the cafe through the back exit, Catherine moving with practiced ease that suggested this wasn't her first time evading danger. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and the particular kind of air freshener favored by federal agencies. Ma'am. The driver addressed Catherine with obvious respect. "The safe house is ready, 40-minute drive. Team 2 is already in position." "Thank you, Marcus. This is my daughter, Alethea. She's the primary target." Marcus met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Ms. Walsh, we've been briefed. You're safe now." As we drove through Boston's twisted streets, Catherine filled in more pieces of the puzzle. After I died, Richard became more bold. The Calabrese connection started small little favors, overlooked regulations. By the time he realized he was in their pocket, it was too late. They owned him. But he kept playing the successful businessman, while bleeding the company dry to pay his debts. The gambling wasn't recreation, it was desperation. He kept thinking one big win would solve everything. Classic gambler's fallacy from a man who should have known better. "Did you know about Madison, about Sarah?" "I found out 2 years ago. I was proud of Madison for finding real love, devastated that she felt she had to hide it. Another life distorted by Richard's poison." "She's free now, they both are." "Thanks to you." Catherine studied me with those analytical eyes. "You gave everyone what I couldn't, a clean ending, or at least the chance for one." We were leaving the city now, heading into the Massachusetts countryside. The safe house, when we arrived, looked like a modest colonial home. Only the subtle security cameras and reinforced windows suggested it was anything more. Inside, more federal agents waited. A command center had been set up in what should have been the dining room, complete with monitors and communication equipment. Ms. Walsh, a woman in an FBI windbreaker, approached. "Agent Sarah Foster, I've been your mother's handler for the last 10 years. We need to discuss the current threat assessment." She led us to a secure room, windowless and probably soundproofed, the kind of place where dangerous truths could be spoken safely. "The Calabrese family is in disarray," Foster began. "Our raids last night netted 16 high-level members, including 2 of the 3 brothers who run the organization. But the 3rd brother, Vincent, is still at large. Our intelligence suggests he blames you for the family's downfall." "Not Richard?" I asked. "Richard's in custody. You're accessible. Vincent Calabrese isn't known for complex thinking. He wants revenge, and you're the easiest target." "What about Madison, Sarah, Helen?" "All in protective custody. Ms. Morrison, excuse me, Ms. Chen and her wife are at the location you suggested in Vermont. Mrs. Morrison is with her sister in Maine, but you're the primary target. You're the one who brought everything crashing down." I felt Catherine tense beside me. How credible is the threat? Foster pulled up files on her tablet. "Vincent's already reached out to 3 different contract killers. We've intercepted communications, but he's not stupid enough to use the same channels twice. He could have people we don't know about." "So I'm supposed to hide forever?" "No," Catherine said firmly. "You're supposed to finish what you started. Running is what I did, and it cost me 35 years. We're going to face this head on." "How?" She smiled, and for the first time I saw myself in her expression. The same cold calculation, the same strategic mind that had built and destroyed empires. "We're going to give Vincent Calabrese exactly what he wants, a clear shot at you. And when he takes it, the FBI will be waiting." Foster looked alarmed. "Ma'am, I can't authorize using your daughter as bait." "You don't have to authorize it," I said, understanding Catherine's plan immediately. "I'm a private citizen. If I choose to go about my business despite the threats, that's my decision. If the FBI happens to be watching when Vincent makes his move—" "You're both insane," Foster said. "This isn't a game. These people are killers." "So was my father," I pointed out. "He just used medication instead of bullets. I'm tired of running from shadows. If Vincent wants me, let him come." Catherine squeezed my hand. "That's my daughter. Now let's discuss the details. I assume you have a plan." "Always," I said. "But first I need to know something. The poison in grandmother's tea, how did you know about that? You weren't there." Catherine's expression darkened. "Because he tried the same thing with me right before I disappeared. Slipped something into my coffee during what was supposed to be a reconciliation meeting. I recognized the symptoms, and got to a hospital in time. When I heard about Eleanor's death, the pattern was clear. He has a type, I agreed, which is why we can predict his moves. Vincent Calabresi is working with someone inside, someone who knows my routines, my vulnerabilities, someone who could get close enough to poison me without raising suspicion. You think Richard's still pulling strings from jail. I think a man who spent 35 years building criminal networks doesn't lose all his contacts in one night. He can't kill me himself, but he can point Vincent in the right direction. Foster was typing rapidly on her tablet. If you're right, if there's an inside threat, then we use it, I said. Set a trap, make them think they've succeeded, then spring it when they get overconfident. Like father, like daughter, Catherine murmured, but it sounded like approval. We spent the next 3 hours planning turning the hunter into the hunted. By the end, even Foster looked impressed. This might actually work, she admitted. It's insane, but it might work. The best plans usually are, I said. Now let's discuss the poison. If they're following Richard's playbook, they'll use something subtle, something that could be explained as natural causes if no one looked too closely. Catherine pulled up chemical structures on a laptop. Digitalis like he used on Mother, or something newer. Fentanyl in small doses. Ricin if they want to be dramatic. No, I said, thinking. He'll want poetry. Justice in his twisted mind. It'll be something connected to the beginning, to how this all started. The welcome cocktail, Catherine breathed. At the house. He tried to poison you at the family dinner. And failed because I didn't drink it. He'll try again, same method, different venue. Somewhere public, somewhere I'd feel safe. Somewhere like... The Gilded Lily, we said in unison. Foster was already making calls. I need surveillance on the Gilded Lily immediately. Check all staff, especially recent hires. Someone's going to try to poison Alethea Walsh, probably in the next 48 hours. As plans took shape around us, I looked at Catherine. My mother, the genius who'd created an empire and then vanished to survive. We were alike in so many ways, but there was one crucial difference. She'd run to save herself. I was standing my ground to save everyone else. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. I've been sure since the day I found out what he did to you, I replied. This ends now. All of it. No more running, no more hiding, no more fear. She nodded slowly. Then let's end it. Together this time. For the first time in 35 years, Catherine Walsh and her daughter were on the same side of the board. Richard Morrison and Vincent Calabresi had no idea what they were about to face. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the prey to walk in. The Gilded Lily was closed to the public that night, though anyone walking by would never know it. Through the windows, it looked like business, as usual. Patrons nursing drinks, bartenders mixing cocktails, quiet conversations in shadowy booths. What they couldn't see were the federal agents playing customers the surveillance equipment hidden in every corner, or the fact that every drink being poured was water-tinted to look like alcohol. I stood behind the bar in my usual Tuesday night spot, mixing a martini with movements I could perform in my sleep. Catherine sat at the far end of the bar playing the role of a regular customer, though her eyes never stopped scanning the room. 3 nights had passed since we'd set the trap. 3 nights of waiting for someone to make a move. Anything, I murmured to the wire tucked under my collar. Negative. Foster's voice came through my earpiece. All staff have been cleared. No new hires, no substitutions. If someone's going to make a move, they're not here yet. I was starting to wonder if we'd guessed wrong when the door opened and Madison walked in. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be in Vermont with Sarah safe and protected. Yet here she was, looking haggard and desperate, making a beeline for the bar. Alethea, she said breathlessly, thank God you're here. I need your help. Every agent in the room tensed. This wasn't part of the plan. Madison. I kept my voice level while my mind raced. What are you doing here? Where's Sarah? That's why I need your help. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She's missing. She got a call this morning about her FBI interview, left to meet with them, and never came back. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. "Stand down," Foster said in my ear. "This could be a setup. Madison might be compromised." I studied my sister carefully. Her distress seemed genuine, but I'd learned never to trust appearances in my family. "When did she leave?" I asked, continuing to mix drinks as though nothing was wrong. 6 hours ago. The FBI says they never called her. They don't have any interviews scheduled. Madison's eyes filled with tears. Someone tricked her, Alethea. Someone took her. Catherine had gone very still at the end of the bar. She caught my eye, a silent warning in her expression. "Show me the messages," I said. Madison handed over her phone. The texts were there, someone claiming to be Agent Foster asking Sarah to come in for additional testimony. The language was almost right, but there were tells. Slightly wrong formatting a phone number that was 1 digit off from the real FBI contact. "Vincent Calabresi," I said quietly. "He couldn't get to me, so he's going after everyone I care about." "This changes things," Foster said in my ear. "We need to abort. If he has a hostage—" "No." I cut her off, speaking clearly so Madison could hear too. "This is exactly what he wants. To make us react emotionally, make mistakes. Sarah's smart. She'll keep herself alive until we can find her." Madison grabbed my hand across the bar. "How can you be so calm? This is my wife we're talking about." "Because panic won't save her." I squeezed her hand, then let go. "But thinking will. Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail." As Madison recounted the morning's events, I noticed movement near the kitchen. One of the servers, not an agent but a real employee who'd been cleared, was acting nervous. He kept glancing at Madison, then at me, then at his phone. "Marcus," I said quietly, knowing the head of security would hear me. "Server in Section 3, watch him." The server must have sensed attention turning his way. He set down his tray and started walking quickly toward the back exit. He made it 3 steps before 2 agents intercepted him. "I didn't want to," he shouted as they restrained him. "They have my daughter, said they'd kill her if I didn't—" "Kitchen," Foster barked in my ear. "He came from the kitchen. All units converge." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. In that split second of darkness, I heard Madison gasp, felt something splash across my shirt, smelled something sweet and chemical. "Nobody move," Foster's voice boomed through the restaurant. I looked down. My shirt was soaked with liquid from a glass Madison had been holding, a glass I hadn't served her, a glass that had appeared while my attention was on the nervous server. Poison. Catherine was suddenly beside me, her facade of calm cracking. "Probably." I carefully didn't touch the liquid. "Madison, where did that glass come from?" My sister stared at it in horror. I don't know. It was just there. I picked it up without thinking when you were talking to that server." "Classic misdirection," I said. "Create a distraction with the nervous employee while someone else plants the real threat." Agents swarmed the kitchen, but I already knew what they'd find. During the chaos, someone had slipped in and out, leaving behind a poisoned drink that I was supposed to consume. If Madison hadn't picked it up first— "Sample team incoming," Foster announced. "Nobody touches anything. Madison, we need to get you to a hospital immediately." "I didn't drink any," Madison protested. "It just spilled." "Skin contact might be enough, depending on what it is," Catherine said. She was in full scientist mode, now examining the spill pattern without touching it. "The color's wrong for digitalis. Could be ricin in solution or this." An agent emerged from the kitchen holding an empty vial with gloved hands. "Found it in the trash. Fentanyl. Concentrated dose." "Enough to kill?" I asked. "Enough to kill 5 people," the agent confirmed. Madison swayed on her feet. "But I didn't— Sarah, we have to find Sarah." "We will," I promised. "But first we need to get you checked out. Even skin contact with fentanyl can be dangerous." As paramedics arrived to take Madison for evaluation, I noticed something tucked under the bar where the poisoned glass had been placed. A folded piece of paper. "Don't touch it," Foster warned, but I was already using tongs to pick it up carefully, unfolding it. The message was brief. Your sister for mine, midnight, Morrison Industries loading dock. Come alone or the FBI agent dies. He doesn't have just Sarah, I said, showing the note to Foster and Catherine. He has the real agent Foster, too, the one who was supposed to interview Sarah. Foster, the one who'd been running our operation, went pale. That's Jessica Foster, my partner. She was on protective detail for Sarah Chen. So Vincent grabs them both, uses Jessica's credentials to lure Sarah out, then uses them both as bait to get to me. I set the note down carefully. He's smarter than we gave him credit for. You're not going, Catherine said immediately. It's clearly a trap. Of course it's a trap, but he has 2 innocent people. I can't let them die because of me. The FBI can handle this, Foster insisted. We'll surround the building, take him down. And he'll kill them both the moment he sees the first agent. I was already thinking through scenarios, calculating odds. No, this needs to be handled differently. He wants me specifically. There's something personal about this beyond just the Calabrese family's downfall. What do you mean? Catherine asked. Think about it. He could have grabbed Madison Helen, anyone close to me. But he took Sarah, Madison's wife, and he's demanding we meet at Morrison Industries. This isn't just about revenge, it's about Richard. My phone rang. Unknown number. Answer it, Foster said. We're tracing. Hello, Vincent, I said, putting it on speaker. Smart girl. His voice was rough accented, carrying the weight of old-school organized crime. Figured out my name already. It wasn't hard. You're the only Calabrese brother still free, though not for long. He laughed. Maybe not, but I'll take you with me. You and your father's whole rotten family. My father's in federal custody. What does he have to do with this? Everything. The word exploded from him. 30 years my family did business with Richard Morrison. 30 years of moving his money, cleaning his sins, keeping his secrets. We were partners. You were parasites feeding off each other, I corrected. We were family. His voice cracked with emotion. My daughter, my Maria, she worked in his building. Trusted position, good pay. Until 5 years ago. Something cold settled in my stomach. What happened 5 years ago? Your father happened. She found something in the books, discrepancies, places where money vanished. She thought it was a mistake, tried to fix it. But it wasn't a mistake, was it? It was him stealing from us. So you killed her, I guessed. He killed her, Vincent roared. Made it look like suicide. 23 years old, my baby girl, and he threw her off the roof of Morrison Industries because she found where he was skimming our money. I closed my eyes. Another ghost in my father's collection. Another life sacrificed to keep his secrets. I'm sorry about Maria, I said, meaning it. But Sarah and Agent Foster had nothing to do with that. Let them go. No, you took my brothers, destroyed my family's business. Your father took my daughter. Now I take what matters to you. Vincent, listen. Midnight, loading dock, alone, or I start sending pieces of them to your bar. The line went dead. Got him, one of the tech agents announced. He's calling from inside Morrison Industries, 40th floor. The boardroom, I said. He's in the boardroom where I took the company from my father. It's poetic justice in his mind. We can have teams there in 20 minutes, Foster said. Which is why I need to go now before he expects it. I was already moving, grabbing things I'd need. He's emotional, acting on impulse. That makes him dangerous, but also predictable. He'll be focused on the symbolism, not the tactics. You're not going alone, Catherine said firmly. Yes, I am, but not unprepared. I pulled out a second phone, one the FBI didn't know about. I've spent 5 years building networks, Catherine. Not all of them are entirely legal. She raised an eyebrow. What kind of networks? The kind that can get into a building without using the front door. The kind that owe me favors for keeping their businesses afloat when the banks wouldn't touch them. I typed a quick message. Vincent thinks he's the only one with connections to Boston's underworld. He's wrong. Alethea Foster warned, "If you're planning what I think you're planning, then you should probably stop listening." I remove my wire set it on the bar. What happens next isn't FBI business, it's family business. "I'm coming with you," Catherine insisted. "No, you've been in hiding for 35 years. I won't be the reason you get killed now." I softened my tone. "Stay here. Help them coordinate. Use that brilliant mind to figure out Vincent's escape routes, but let me handle the face-to-face." She grabbed my hand as I turned to leave. "You're just like him, you know. My younger self. Brave and brilliant and absolutely infuriating when you've made up your mind. Then you know you can't stop me." "I know." She pulled me into a fierce hug, the first real embrace we'd shared. "But I can tell you this Vincent's not the real threat. He's angry and grieving and sloppy. The real threat is whoever helped him get into that building. Someone with access, with knowledge of the systems." "I know," I whispered back. "That's why I'm really going." I left through the back exit knowing the FBI would track me, but hoping my other resources would move faster. The streets were dark, the city settling into its late-night rhythm. Somewhere in the Morrison Industries building, Sarah and Agent Foster were being held by a man driven mad by grief and revenge. But Catherine was right. Vincent Calabrese couldn't have gotten into that building alone. Someone had helped him. Someone who knew the security systems, the access codes, the blind spots. Someone who was still playing Richard Morrison's game, even with him behind bars. My phone buzzed. A message from an unlisted number: "Maintenance entrance, 10 minutes, door will be open." T. Tony Ferretti, former mob enforcer turned security consultant. I'd helped him go legitimate when no one else would trust him. Time to collect on that debt. Another message, this one from Madison. "At hospital, I'm okay. Find Sarah, please." I would. But first I had to find out who the real puppet master was. Vincent thought he was in control, but someone was pulling his strings. Someone who wanted me dead as badly as my father did. The maintenance entrance was exactly where Tony said it would be, the door slightly ajar. I slipped inside, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. Somewhere above me, Vincent waited with his hostages and his grief. But I wasn't going up there as Alethea Morrison, the billionaire who destroyed an empire. I was going as Catherine Walsh's daughter, raised by criminals and trained by truth. Vincent Calabrese was about to learn the difference. The maintenance tunnels beneath Morrison Industries smelled of industrial cleaner and decades of secrets. I moved through them, guided by memory and Tony's hastily drawn map, every shadow a potential threat. 39 floors above Vincent Calabrese waited with 2 hostages and a lifetime of rage. My phone vibrated. Tony again. "Service elevator disabled floors 35 to 40. Stairs are clear to 38. Camera blind spot on 39 northwest corner." I typed back, "Security." "Skeleton crew, most pulled back when FBI showed presence earlier. Vincent's got maybe 2 men with him, max." 2 men plus Vincent against me. Not ideal odds, but I'd faced worse in boardrooms. I reached the stairwell and began climbing. Each floor brought back memories. 23rd, where I'd first pitched Prometheus to investors, who laughed at the bartender playing businesswoman. 31st, where my father had his secondary office, the one he thought no one knew about. 35th, where Maria Calabrese had probably discovered the truth that killed her. At 38, I paused. 2 more floors to Vincent, but something felt wrong. The building was too quiet, even for midnight. Where was the FBI? Foster had said 20 minutes, and it had been nearly 30. Another message, this time from an unknown number. "They won't come. I made sure of it. Consider this professional courtesy, one businessman to another. You have 10 minutes before the building burns. B. Bradley." My sister's soon-to-be ex-husband was the inside man. I should have seen it. He'd been too helpful, too willing to cooperate with the FBI. The perfect grieving husband act had fooled everyone, including me. No time to process the betrayal. If the building was rigged to burn, I had minutes to save Sarah and Agent Foster. I burst through the stairwell door onto the 39th floor. The executive level spread before me, all glass and shadow. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, appropriate for what was coming. "Vincent," I called out. "I'm here. Let's talk." Movement from the corner office. Vincent Calabresi emerged looking nothing like the polished criminals who usually worked with my father. He was old school, thick shoulders, scarred hands, grief etched into every line of his face. Behind him, I glimpsed two figures tied to chairs. "You came alone," he said, sounding almost disappointed. "I expected tricks." "No tricks, just truth. Bradley Thornton set us both up." That got his attention. "What?" "Check your phone. Should be a message from him by now. This building is set to burn in—" I checked my watch. 8 minutes. He's cleaning up loose ends. "You, me, the hostages. Everyone who could implicate him." Vincent pulled out his phone, read something that made his face darken further. "Son of a bitch. We can discuss his treachery later. Right now, we need to get out." I took a step forward. "Let me help with the hostages." "Stay back." One of his men raised a gun, young and nervous. "Shoot me and we all die here," I said calmly, "or we can work together and live to get revenge on the man who played us both." Vincent studied me for a long moment. In his eyes, I saw a father's grief, a criminal's calculation, and something unexpected respect. "You're not like your father," he said finally. "No, I'm like my mother. She knew when to fight and when to survive. Right now, we need to survive." He nodded to his men. "Cut them loose." Sarah looked roughed up but alert when they removed her gag. "Alethea, what's happening?" "Bradley's happening," I said, working on her bonds. "Long story. Can you walk?" "I think so." Agent Jessica Foster was unconscious, a nasty bruise on her temple. One of Vincent's men lifted her fireman style. "Stairs?" Vincent asked. "No. Bradley's too smart. He'll have rigged those first." I thought fast, Catherine's analytical mind working through possibilities. The executive elevator. It has separate fire controls, goes straight to the parking garage. If he didn't think we'd get this far... We ran for it, a bizarre group, the billionaire, the mob boss, his thugs, and 2 kidnapping victims. The elevator doors opened immediately. Thank God for small miracles. As we descended, Vincent spoke. "Your father visited me 2 weeks ago. Video call from Federal Holding." "That's not possible. He's in isolation." "Money makes anything possible. He wanted you dead. Offered me $10 million from hidden accounts if I killed you." "But you took Sarah instead." "I wanted you to suffer first, like I suffered when Maria died." His voice cracked. "She was everything good I'd ever made in this ugly life. Your father took her because she was honest." The elevator shuddered, slowing. Floor 25, not our stop. "Move." I ordered, hitting the emergency button. Nothing. The doors began to open. Bradley stood in the hallway looking nothing like the desperate son-in-law from a week ago. This was the real Bradley Thornton Cold, calculating his father's son after all. "Hello, everyone," he said pleasantly. Behind him stood 4 men with automatic weapons. "Slight change of plans." Vincent reached for his gun, but Bradley tutted. "I wouldn't. My men have orders to shoot everyone except Alethea if you so much as twitch. I need her alive. The rest of you are expendable." "Why?" I asked, though I was already calculating angles, distances, possibilities. "Because you're going to sign some papers. Transfer of ownership for Prometheus, the Morrison shares all of it, to a shell company that will eventually trace back to me." He smiled. "My father always said the best deals are made under duress. Your father's in federal prison. For now. But with your fortune and Morrison Industries infrastructure, I can buy enough judges to spring him. Then we rebuild correctly this time. No trail leading back to organized crime, no vulnerable women finding discrepancies. Just clean, untraceable profit." "Like Maria Calabresi found," I asked, watching Vincent tense in my peripheral vision. Bradley's smile faltered slightly. "That was your father's mess. He got sloppy, emotional. Killing her was stupid. Should have just paid her off or relocated her. You were there, Vincent breathed. You were there when my Maria died. I was in the building. Richard called me panicking, said his secretary had found something. I told him to handle it quietly, but he went full dramatic, threw her off the roof like this was some movie. Bradley shrugged. Cost us a lot to clean that up. Vincent made a sound like a wounded animal. In the confined space of the elevator, his rage was a living thing. So you see, Bradley continued, seemingly oblivious to the danger, I'm much more practical than Richard. I won't kill you, Alethea. Just bankrupt you and leave you to tend bar for real. Poetic, really. There's just one problem with your plan, I said. What's that? I smiled my mother's smile, cold, calculating. I don't make deals under duress. I make war. I hit the elevator's fire override, not the public one Bradley had disabled, but the hidden one my father had installed for his own escapes. The door slammed shut as the elevator plummeted toward the basement. Bradley's shocked face disappeared as bullets sparked off the closing steel. 5 minutes until the building burns, I announced to our group. Basement has old tunnels connecting to the subway maintenance areas. We go down then out. You planned for this? Sarah asked, steadying herself against the elevator wall. I plan for everything. It's what separates survivors from victims. The elevator hit the basement level hard enough to buckle my knees. We spilled out into darkness lit only by emergency strips along the floor. Behind us, I could hear Bradley's team in the stairwell descending fast. This way. I led them through passages I'd explored during my hostile takeover research. Know your battlefield, Catherine had written in one of her journals. Every entrance, every exit, every secret. The tunnels were worse than I remembered, water dripping from corroded pipes, rats scuttling away from our footsteps. Agent Foster was starting to come around, mumbling incoherently as Vincent's man carried her. Why save us? Vincent asked as we ran. I came to kill you. Because you're grieving. Bradley's just evil. There's a difference. Your father killed my daughter, and he'll die in prison for it. But Bradley, he'll keep killing if we don't stop him. I paused at a junction, orienting myself. Left here, should connect to the old bootlegger tunnels. How do you know about those? Vincent sounded impressed despite himself. My great-grandfather ran liquor during Prohibition, family business before he went legitimate. Some of us remember our roots. Behind us, an explosion shook the tunnel, the building's basement levels erupting in flame, Bradley's insurance policy against our survival. Move. I shoved everyone forward as heat chased us through the passages. The air grew thick with smoke, each breath burning. Sarah stumbled, coughing. I caught her arm, half dragging her forward. Almost there. See that light? That's the subway access. We burst through a rusted gate into a maintenance tunnel just as the passage behind us became an inferno. The roar of flames mixed with the distant rumble of late-night trains. Everyone alive. I did a quick count. Vincent's 2 men, Agent Foster, barely conscious. Sarah gasping but upright. Vincent himself looking like he'd aged another decade. My phone, miraculously intact, buzzed with messages. The FBI had arrived at Morrison Industries to find it fully ablaze. Bradley was being sought, but had vanished. Madison was safe at the hospital, demanding updates. What now? Vincent asked. Now we get Agent Foster medical attention. Sarah, too. I looked at the mob boss who'd come to kill me. And you decide what matters more, revenge on a dead dream or justice for Maria. What's the difference? Revenge means you keep coming after me, probably die in the attempt. Justice means you testify against Bradley, help put him away for your daughter's murder. He considered this. And what do I get? Witness protection, new life, chance to honor Maria by living better than you have. You'd trust me? I'd trust your grief. It's the most honest thing in this whole mess. Sirens echoed above us. The FBI had tracked my phone despite my precautions. Within minutes, we were surrounded by agents, EMTs, enough firepower to stop a small army. Foster, the one who'd been running the operation, pushed through the crowd. Alethea, thank God. When the building went up, Bradley Thornton, I said simply. Inside man. He's got maybe a 20-minute head start. On it. She barked orders, setting a citywide net in motion. I sat on a concrete barrier, suddenly exhausted. Sarah slumped beside me, our shoulders touching. Madison's going to kill me, she said. She's going to kiss you first, then possibly kill you. I managed a weak smile. Thank you for not dying. Thank you for saving me. Us. She glanced at Vincent being led away by agents. That was unexpected. Catherine taught me something tonight. Sometimes the real enemy isn't the obvious one. It's the one hiding behind the reasonable mask. Speaking of which, Sarah pointed to a figure approaching through the chaos. Catherine walked toward us, ignoring FBI protests, her face a masterwork of controlled fear. She'd maintained her composure through 35 years of hiding, but seeing her daughter emerge from a burning building had finally cracked it. You're an idiot, she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. Brave and brilliant and an absolute idiot. Learned from the best, I murmured against her shoulder. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet but fierce. Bradley. In the wind, but not for long. He made one crucial mistake. What's that? He let me live, and I know exactly where he's going. Foster appeared at my elbow. Care to share with the class? His father. Everything Bradley does is about impressing his father. He'll try to break him out, probably already has men moving on the federal facility. I stood, new energy flowing through exhaustion. If you move now... Already on it, Foster assured me. Teams dispatched 10 minutes ago when you mentioned it in the tunnels. I blinked. You heard that? Your phone was broadcasting the whole time. You really think we'd let you go in alone? She grinned. Though I'll deny that in court. Officially, you acted without FBI knowledge or support. Officially, I'm just a bartender who got lucky. I agreed. 2 hours later, Bradley Thornton was in custody, caught trying to bribe guards at his father's federal holding facility. The money he'd offered traced back to accounts stolen from Morrison Industries, the same hidden funds my father had used for his criminal enterprises. Vincent Calabresi sat in an interrogation room spilling 30 years of secrets. His testimony would put away what remained of his organization and add decades to my father's sentence. Sarah reunited with Madison in a tearful embrace that reminded me family could mean chosen bonds, not just blood. And Catherine and I stood outside the FBI building watching dawn break over Boston. Morrison Industries was gone, its headquarters a smoking ruin. But Prometheus would rise from its ashes stronger and cleaner than what came before. Was it worth it? Catherine asked. Destroying everything to get justice. It wasn't destruction, I corrected. It was revelation. The rot was always there. I just exposed it to sunlight. And now we build something better. Together, if you're willing. She took my hand, mother and daughter united after 35 years of separation. I've been waiting to hear you say that since the day I left. No more waiting, I promised. No more hiding, just truth. The sun rose higher, burning away the shadows of night. Somewhere my father sat in a cell contemplating a lifetime of consequences. Bradley faced the same fate. The Calabresi crime family was finished. But we were just beginning. Come on, I said, tugging Catherine toward the street. I'll buy you breakfast. There's this little cafe that makes the best pancakes in Boston. Sounds perfect, she agreed. We have 35 years to catch up on. We walked into the morning, leaving the FBI and the crimes and the burning building behind. 2 women who'd survived the worst men could do, ready to build something better from the ashes. The city woke around us, unaware that its old king was dead and new queens had risen. That was fine. We didn't need recognition or revenge anymore. We just needed each other and the truth. Everything else would follow. The cafe Catherine suggested wasn't the trendy spot I'd expected, but a tiny hole in the wall in Chinatown, the kind of place that had survived decades by serving perfect food to people who knew better than to ask questions. We sat in a back booth, 2 cups of black coffee between us, the weight of revelation settling like dust after an explosion. "You knew I was alive," Catherine said. It wasn't a question. I suspected. Too many coincidences. Anonymous tips to the FBI that knew exactly where to look, the way certain evidence appeared just when I needed it. I stirred my coffee, watching patterns form in the dark liquid. "How long have you been back in Boston?" 3 years. Ever since you found out about the stolen trust fund?" She smiled ruefully. "I couldn't stay away once I knew you were making your move. Had to be close enough to help if needed." "Under what name?" "Catherine Chen. I thought it was poetic taking the name of the culture your father dismissed so readily. Plus it made me Sarah's distant aunt on paper, gave me a reason to be interested in her medical care." I set down my spoon carefully. "You're the one who connected Sarah with the specialists in Switzerland." Guilty. Though you paying for it was your own beautiful instinct. She leaned back, studying me with those analytical eyes. "You have your father's strategic mind, but your grandmother's heart. It's a powerful combination. Tell me about grandmother, the real story." Catherine's expression darkened. Alethea Morrison was the only person in that family who saw through Richard from the beginning. She knew he was stealing my work, knew about the bigamy, knew he was dangerous. She tried to protect us both. But she underestimated his ruthlessness. When I sent her evidence of his crimes, I thought she'd confront him carefully, maybe involve lawyers. Instead, she invited him over for tea and told him exactly what she thought of him. Catherine's voice carried old pain. She called me that night, said she'd given him an ultimatum: return what he'd stolen, or she'd expose everything. He killed her for it. Within 12 hours, Dorothy saw him leave, but I knew the moment I heard Eleanor had died. Heart failure, they said. Natural causes for a 75-year-old woman with a cardiac condition. She laughed bitterly. Richard always did like his murders neat. Why didn't you come forward then? With what proof I was officially dead? Remember, any testimony I gave would be from a ghost. Plus, I had no documentation Richard had destroyed or stolen it all. I needed time to rebuild my evidence base, and I needed you to be old enough to protect yourself. The waitress appeared with plates of food I didn't remember ordering. Congee with preserved eggs, turnip cakes, chicken feet, comfort food from someone else's childhood. I lived above a restaurant like this in Vancouver. Catherine explained, picking up chopsticks with practiced ease. The owner's daughter taught me to appreciate real Chinese food, not the Americanized stuff Richard would order to seem cultured. Tell me about the years between, where you went, what you did. So she did. Montreal first teaching economics under an assumed name. Vancouver next, working with immigrant communities to establish small businesses. Singapore for 2 years, consulting for startups that needed financial modeling. Always moving, she said. Always looking over my shoulder, but also always working. Every algorithm I created, every business I helped build, I was refining the theories Richard stole, making them better, cleaner, more ethical. And feeding information to law enforcement. When I could. Little things at first. A tip about money laundering here, suspicious trading patterns there. Building a case so slowly that no one could trace it back to a single source. She smiled. Though I think Agent Foster suspected. She's sharp. She never said anything. She wouldn't. Plausible deniability. As long as the information was good, she didn't need to know where it came from. We ate in companionable silence for a while, the restaurant filling with the early morning crowd. Elderly Chinese men reading newspapers, young professionals grabbing quick breakfasts, the eternal rhythm of city life. There's something else, Catherine said eventually, about Maria Calabresi. I looked up sharply. What about her? I knew her. She was in my economic modeling class at Boston University. I taught there under another name for a semester. Brilliant girl. Reminded me of you, actually. That same hunger to understand how systems really worked. You taught the woman my father would later murder. Life has a terrible sense of irony. Catherine pushed rice around her bowl. When she got the job at Morrison Industries, she emailed me. So proud. Said she was going to apply everything I'd taught her about forensic accounting. Christ. I tried to warn her off subtly, suggested other companies, other opportunities. But she was determined, wanted to work for the great Richard Morrison. Her voice turned bitter. I should have told her the truth. She wouldn't have believed you. No one would have believed Richard Morrison was a murderer without proof. Still, she died because she was smart enough to spot patterns I taught her to see. That weight will never leave me. My phone buzzed, Madison texting that she and Sarah were home safe, asking if I was okay. I showed it to Catherine. Your sister turned out better than I expected, she said, given Richard's influence. She had Sarah. Love has a way of bringing out truth in people. Speaking of which, Catherine's tone turned careful. Is there anyone in your life beyond the empire building and justice-seeking? I laughed. When would I have had time? Every relationship I've attempted ended when they realized I was more interested in spreadsheets than small talk. You'll find someone. Probably when you least expect it. She paused. I did, actually, in Singapore. Her name was Lynn. We were together for 3 years. What happened? She wanted honesty. A real life together, not one built on lies about my past. I couldn't give her that while Richard was still free. Her eyes grew distant. She married someone else. Has 2 children now. I still send birthday cards. Under what name? She knows them all. Lynn was the one person I trusted with everything. She helped me refine the financial models, actually. Some of the best features in the Prometheus system came from her suggestions. Do you regret it? Choosing revenge over love? I chose justice over personal happiness, Catherine corrected. And yes, some nights I regret it deeply. But then I think about Maria Calabresi, about your grandmother, about you growing up without a mother, and I know I made the only choice I could live with. The waitress cleared our plates, bringing fresh tea. The morning crowd was thinning, leaving us in relative privacy. What now? I asked. Richard's going to prison. Bradley, too. The Calabreses are finished. Morrison Industries is ashes. You've won. We've won, she corrected. And what comes next is harder than revenge rebuilding, making something worthy of all the sacrifices. Prometheus will absorb the legitimate parts of Morrison Industries. The patents will be properly attributed to you. We'll create a foundation in Maria's name for forensic accounting scholarships. And us, Catherine asked. Mother and daughter, where do we go from here? Forward, I said simply. No more looking back, no more hiding. We build a relationship based on who we are now, not who we were then. I'd like that. She reached across the table, taking my hand. I'd like to know my daughter as more than surveillance reports and financial documents. And I'd like to know my mother as more than theories and algorithms. We sat there, hands clasped across the table, 2 women who'd lost decades but gained truth. Outside, Boston churned on, oblivious to our small moment of reconciliation. There's one more thing, Catherine said. About the FBI, they're going to offer you something. Witness protection. Better. A consulting position, using the skills you've developed to help them track financial crimes. I've been doing it informally for years, but you could make it official. Is that what you want for me to become a government employee? I want you to be happy, she said firmly, whether that's running Prometheus, working with the FBI, or going back to tending bar. You've earned the right to choose your own path. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Foster. Alethea, can you come to the federal building? There's someone here who wants to make a deal, but she'll only talk to you. Who? Helen Morrison, your father's wife. She says she has information about murders, plural. I met Catherine's eyes. We'll be right there. We I, Foster asked. I'm bringing Catherine Walsh. It's time everyone met properly. A pause. The Catherine Walsh, the economist. The witness, I corrected. The survivor, the mother. We'll see you in 20 minutes. I hung up and looked at Catherine. Ready to stop being a ghost? I've been ready for 35 years, she said. Let's go hear what Helen has to say. Something tells me Richard's crimes go deeper than even we suspected. We left the restaurant together, mother and daughter, walking into the morning light. Behind us lay decades of separation and secrets. Ahead waited truth, justice, and the chance to build something real from the ashes of lies. One question, Catherine said as we hailed a taxi. How did you know I was alive, really? I smiled. The Walsh framework. Every few years, someone would publish a paper that built on your work in ways only you could have conceived. Different names, different universities, but the same brilliant mind behind them. I've been collecting them for 5 years. And you never tried to find me. I knew you'd come when you were ready, just like you knew I'd be strong enough to handle the truth when I was ready. I opened the taxi door for her. We're economists, Catherine. We understand that timing is everything. She laughed, the sound bright and real. God, I've missed having someone who thinks like me. Well, I said, sliding in beside her, you've got me now, for whatever comes next. The taxi pulled into traffic, carrying us toward whatever new revelations Helen Morrison was about to unleash. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't facing them alone. I had my mother beside me, brilliant and brave and unbreakably mine. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The federal building's interview room had seen its share of confessions, but Helen Morrison looked less like a criminal and more like a woman finally exhaling after holding her breath for 40 years. She sat ramrod straight in an uncomfortable metal chair, her usual perfect appearance, showing cracks, makeup, smudged hair escaping its careful pins, designer suit, wrinkled from a night of revelations. When Catherine and I entered with Foster, Helen's composure shattered entirely. My God, she breathed, staring at Catherine. You're really alive. Hello, Helen, Catherine said quietly. You look well considering. Considering I helped cover up your supposed death. Considering I raised your daughter while my husband built an empire on your bones. Helen laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. Yes, I suppose I look wonderful. Foster cleared her throat. Mrs. Morrison, you said you had information about murders, plural. I do. Helen straightened, gathering the remnants of her dignity. But I'll only speak with full immunity. For everything. The cover-ups, the money laundering, I turned a blind eye to all of it. That's not my call, Foster began. Then get someone whose call it is, Helen snapped. What I know will close cases going back 40 years, but I want protection and I want it in writing. Foster left to make calls. In the sudden silence, the three of us sat with decades of complicated history, crowding the small room. You did a good job with her, Catherine said, finally nodding toward me. She's remarkable. She raised herself, Helen replied. I just existed in the same house. Richard made sure I knew my place, the decorative wife who asked no questions and saw no evil. But you saw everything I said. Yes. Helen met my eyes for the first time. I saw everything and said nothing. That's my crime, Alethea. Not what I did, but what I didn't do. Tell me about the others, I said. The murders. Helen pulled out a small notebook from her purse. I started keeping records after your grandmother died. Names, dates, patterns. People who crossed Richard and conveniently disappeared. She opened the notebook, revealing pages of careful handwriting. Maria Calabrese you know about, but there were others. Janet Huang, the accountant who questioned the Morrison algorithm's origins. Car accident 1995. Marcus Webb, the journalist investigating Richard's connections to organized crime. Overdose 1998 despite being a teetotaler. Jesus, Catherine whispered. Dr. Patricia Morse, the oncologist treating Catherine. Helen glanced at my mother. She died in a hiking accident 2 weeks after you disappeared. Fell off a trail she'd hiked hundreds of times. Patricia died. Catherine's voice cracked. She was helping me plan my escape. Said she'd testify about Richard trying to influence my treatment. Which is why she had to go. Helen turned another page. Should I continue? There are 12 names here. 12 people who died because they threatened Richard's empire. How, I asked. How did he manage it all? The Calabrases handled the wet work. Richard just pointed and paid, always through intermediaries, always with plausible deniability. She laughed bitterly. He'd come home from golf mention casually that a problem had been resolved, and I'd know. Another death on our dining room table. Foster returned with AUSA Chen and a stack of papers. Immunity deal as requested. Full protection in exchange for complete cooperation. Helen signed without hesitation. Then she began to talk. For 3 hours, she laid out 40 years of crimes. The murders were just the beginning. There was also blackmail of judges, bribery of regulators, a complex web of criminal connections that made Morrison Industries less a company and more a RICO enterprise with a stock ticker. The FBI has been circling for years, Helen said, but Richard always stayed one step ahead. Paid informants in law enforcement had people inside the Justice Department. He knew about investigations before they officially started. Who, Foster demanded. Helen provided names. Retired agents, current prosecutors, even a judge on the federal bench. The scope was staggering. This is why I stayed, Helen said, looking at me. Not for love or money or status. For evidence. Every dinner party, every golf game, every whispered conversation, I was documenting it all, waiting for someone strong enough to bring him down. You could have come forward earlier, Catherine said. With what protection Richard owned judges. He had killers on speed dial. I was one suspicious question away from a tragic accident. Helen's voice turned fierce. So I played the perfect wife and gathered ammunition. 35 years of it. She pulled out a safety deposit box key. Everything's there. Documents, recordings, photographs, enough to bury what's left of his network. Foster took the key reverently. This is extraordinary. It's survival, Helen corrected. Mine and yours, Alethea. Every name in that box is someone who wanted you dead once they knew what you were planning. Bradley Thornton was just the latest. Where will you go? I asked. After you testify. Marcus and I have plans. She smiled for the first time. My trainer, remember, we're thinking New Zealand, somewhere far from Boston winters and bad memories. You deserve happiness, Catherine said quietly. We all do after this. Helen studied her husband's mistress, the brilliant woman he'd tried to erase. I hated you for so long, the ghost he compared me to, the genius I could never match. But you were just another victim, weren't you? We all were, Catherine agreed. But we survived. That matters. The formal statements took hours more. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, painting the federal building in shades of amber and gold. Helen left in protective custody, heading for a safe house until trial. Foster's team scrambled to process the mountain of new evidence. Catherine and I found ourselves on the building steps breathing free air after hours in windowless rooms. 12 people, I said. He killed 12 people and I never suspected. You couldn't have known. Helen barely knew and she lived with him. Catherine touched my shoulder gently. Don't carry guilt for his crimes. Madison needs to know about all of it. Tomorrow, Catherine suggested. Tonight we both need to process this. My phone rang. Dorothy. Turn on the news, she said without preamble. Channel 5. We found a television in the federal building's lobby. The screen showed Morrison Industries still smoking from last night's fire, but the reporter wasn't talking about arson. Bodies discovered in the basement of the building appear to have been there for years. FBI sources confirm at least 3 sets of remains found in areas that were sealed off during construction in the 1990s. The people who went missing, I breathed. He didn't have them killed elsewhere. He killed them in the building and sealed them in. Their families will finally have closure, Catherine said. The reporter continued. Richard Morrison, already facing federal charges, is expected to be charged with multiple counts of murder. His lawyer has indicated he may be willing to make a deal. I turned away from the screen. No deals, not for this. He's 72 and facing life without parole, Catherine pointed out. He'll die in prison either way. Then let him die knowing everyone knows what he really was. Not a brilliant businessman, but a common murderer who built his empire on corpses. We left the federal building as night fell over Boston. The city lights twinkled like stars indifferent to the day's revelations. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more evidence, more ugly truths dragged into daylight. But tonight I had dinner with my mother. Real dinner in my apartment above the Gilded Lily, cooking together like normal people who hadn't been separated by attempted murder and decades of lies. I don't really know how to do this, I admitted, chopping vegetables with unnecessary precision. The mother-daughter thing. Neither do I, Catherine confessed. I've imagined it so many times, but the reality is more awkward than I expected. We could start small. Weekly dinners, phone calls, build up to normal. I'd like that. She paused in stirring the sauce. Alethea, what you've built, not just the businesses, but the person you've become, it's more than I ever dreamed. You took the worst possible circumstances and created something extraordinary. I had good genes, I said lightly. You had more than that. You had choices, and you consistently chose strength over bitterness, justice over revenge, truth over comfortable lies. She turned to face me fully. I'm proud to be your mother. Whether you call me Catherine or Mom or nothing at all, I'm proud. The words I'd waited 35 years to hear hung in the air between us. I set down my knife and crossed the small kitchen to hug her, both of us crying now, years of separation, dissolving in salt water and fierce embraces. Mom, I tried out the word, tasting its unfamiliarity. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you waited. I'm glad we both survived to have this. We finished cooking through tears and laughter, the simple domestic act, healing something neither of us had known was broken. The pasta was overcooked and the sauce was too salty, but it was the best meal I'd ever eaten. Later, as Catherine prepared to leave for her hotel, she paused at my door. Helen was wrong about one thing. What's that? She didn't raise you. Eleanor did. Through the trust she left, through the faith she had in you, through Dorothy's guardianship of her memory. 3 generations of Morrison women who refused to let Richard win. 4 now, I corrected. Madison's finding her spine. Give her time. Time we have, Catherine said. Finally, we have time. After she left, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city. Below, the Gilded Lily hummed with late-night life. In a federal holding cell, my father faced the ruins of his empire. The Calabrese family was broken. Bradley Thornton would spend decades in prison. Helen would testify and then disappear into witness protection with her trainer. But we, the women Richard Morrison had tried to erase, we remained. Stronger for our scars, connected by our survival, ready to build something better from the ashes. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison, family dinner Sunday, Sarah's cooking. Catherine invited too, maybe Dorothy if she's free, just us girls. Just us girls, I typed back. Wouldn't miss it. A new family born from the destruction of the old. Not perfect, but honest. Not without pain, but facing it together. It was more than I'd ever dared to hope for. It was enough. It was everything. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated boardroom of what was once Morrison Industries, now the headquarters of Prometheus Innovations. The same 40th floor view of Boston Harbor stretched before me, but everything else had changed. The cold glass and steel had been replaced with warm wood and living walls of green. Where my father's portrait once hung, we'd installed a photo gallery, images of every person whose ideas had built this company, starting with Dr. Catherine Walsh. 5 minutes, Ms. Walsh, my assistant informed me. Still getting used to the name change, but it felt right. Alethea Walsh, daughter of Catherine, granddaughter of Eleanor, connected to a line of brilliant women instead of a legacy of lies. Madison appeared in the doorway, professional in her tailored suit, but still learning to carry herself with genuine confidence. The Times reporter is here. You sure you want to do this? It's time, I said. The last interview about the past. After this, we only talk about the future. She nodded understanding. We'd all spent months in courtrooms and FBI offices reliving trauma for the sake of justice. Richard Morrison had been sentenced to life without parole, his empire officially dissolved. Bradley Thornton got 40 years. Vincent Calabrese, in a twist no one saw coming, had become a star witness and now lived under federal protection, sending me occasional letters about his new life as a bakery owner in Montana. "How's Sarah?" I asked. Madison's face lit up. "Clear scans for the 3rd month running. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." She paused. "We're thinking about adopting, starting the process anyway." "You'll be wonderful mothers." "Sarah will be. I'm still figuring out how to be a decent person, much less a parent." "Hey," I caught her arm gently. "You chose truth over comfort. That's the foundation of being decent. Build from there." She squeezed my hand and left to fetch the reporter. I turned back to the window, composing my thoughts. This interview would close the chapter on Morrison Industries, allowing us to fully become something new. "Ms. Walsh." The reporter, a young woman named Jennifer Liu, entered with Madison. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." We sat in the comfortable chairs I'd brought in to replace my father's intimidation furniture. Jennifer pulled out a recorder and notebook, old school but thorough. "Let's start with the obvious question," she began. "Why give this interview now when the trials are over and the company has been restructured?" "Because the story isn't complete without acknowledging the future," I said. "Yes, Morrison Industries was built on theft and maintained through murder. But from its ashes, we're creating something ethical. The algorithms my mother created are now being used as she intended to help small investors understand markets to predict economic downturns that hurt working families to democratize financial intelligence." "Tell me about the Maria Calabrese Foundation." $5 million in initial funding focused on forensic accounting scholarships for women and minorities. Maria died because she was smart enough to spot financial crimes. We want to create an army of Maria Calabreses who are protected and supported instead of silenced. And your mother, Dr. Catherine Walsh, serves as our chief theoretical officer. She's developing new models that incorporate ethical considerations into financial predictions. Turns out, when you factor in human cost, different investment strategies emerge. Jennifer scribbled notes. "The employee ownership model is unusual for a tech company. 40% of Prometheus is owned by employees through a trust. Decisions are made democratically. Profits are shared equitably. We're proving you can be successful without exploitation." "Some critics say you're being naive. That ethical business can't compete with ruthless capitalism." "My father believed that too. He's serving life in federal prison while we're projecting 30% growth annually." I smiled. "I'll take naive over imprisoned any day." "What about personal costs? Your family was destroyed by these revelations." "My family was destroyed long before I exposed it. The revelations allowed us to build something real. I have a relationship with my mother. My sister is free to live authentically. Even Helen found happiness in witness protection. Truth didn't destroy us. Lies did." "Do you ever visit him, your father?" "Once. He asked me to use my influence to get him transferred to a minimum security facility. I declined. He made his choices. Now he lives with them." "That's cold." "That's justice. 12 people are dead because of him. Their families deserve to know he's paying for every single life he took." We talked for another hour covering the business transformation, the ongoing FBI investigation spurred by Helen's evidence, the surprising support from formerly competing companies. When it was over, Jennifer packed up her things. "One last question off the record." I nodded. "Was it worth it losing your father, your family name, your childhood home? Was justice worth all that?" I thought about Sunday dinners with my chosen family, Catherine teaching Sarah economic theory while they cooked, Madison learning to laugh without calculating its effect, Dorothy presiding over it all with quiet satisfaction, Helen's postcards from New Zealand always unsigned but unmistakable. "I didn't lose those things," I said finally. I traded comfortable lies for uncomfortable truths. The price was high, but the return on investment— I gestured at the transformed space around us. Incalculable. After she left, I walked through the building, something I did every evening. The executive floors had been converted to collaborative workspaces. The basement where bodies had been found was now a memorial garden open to the public with plaques for each victim. We'd exorcise the ghosts by acknowledging them. I found Catherine in her lab, really just a comfortable office filled with whiteboards and computers, but she insisted on calling it a lab. She was deep in conversation with Lynn, who'd flown in from Singapore the week before. Watching them together, the easy intimacy of minds that matched, I slipped away without disturbing them. Second chances were rare and precious. The Gilded Lily was packed when I arrived for my Tuesday shift. Word had spread that Alethea Walsh still poured drinks twice a week, and curious customers mixed with regulars. I tied on my apron and got to work finding peace in the simple rhythm of service. "Whiskey neat," a familiar voice ordered. I looked up to find Marcus Helen's former trainer and current partner sitting at the bar. He wasn't supposed to be in the country. "Helen?" I asked quietly. "Is fine. Sends her love. We're just passing through, heading to Europe for a bit." He slid an envelope across the bar. "She wanted you to have this." Inside was a photograph I'd never seen. My grandmother, Eleanor, much younger, standing with a woman who could only be Catherine's mother, my other grandmother. They were laughing at something, arms-linked conspirators, in a joke lost to time. On the back in Helen's handwriting, "Found this in Richard's safe. Proof that women in your family have always found each other despite the men who tried to keep them apart. Be happy, H. Tell her thank you." I managed around the lump in my throat. "Tell her yourself. We'll be back for Christmas." Quietly, of course. He raised his whiskey. "To the women who survived." "To the women who thrived." I corrected, pouring myself a rare drink. The night flowed on. Customers came and went, each with their own stories of triumph and failure, love and loss. I listened, served, offered the occasional wisdom. This was why I kept tending bar, to remember that business was ultimately about people, their hopes and struggles and small victories. Near closing time, a young woman approached the bar nervously, college age, probably with the intense eyes of someone carrying weight beyond her years. "Are you really Alethea Walsh?" she asked. "I am. My name is Christina Huang. Janet Huang was my mother." I set down the glass I'd been polishing. Janet Huang, the accountant who'd questioned the Morrison algorithm, one of my father's victims. "I remember her name," I said carefully. "I'm sorry for your loss." "I was 5 when she died. They said it was an accident, but I never believed it. Then I saw the news about your father, the bodies in the building." She took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to thank you for giving her justice, for proving I wasn't crazy to suspect murder. Your mother was brave to ask questions. I'm sorry she paid such a terrible price for integrity. She left journals, notes about discrepancies she'd found. I could never make sense of them, but maybe—" Christina pulled out a flash drive. "Maybe they could help with something I don't know. I just felt like you should have them." I took the drive, this unexpected gift from another ghost. "Thank you. I'll make sure our forensic team reviews everything. Your mother's work won't be wasted." She smiled, tears and relief mingling. She would have liked that, using math to make things right. That's all she ever wanted to do. After she left, I stood behind the bar where it all began, holding evidence from a woman dead nearly 30 years. The past kept offering up its secrets, each revelation another step toward resolution. Madison appeared at closing time, as she often did these days. "Ready for the board meeting tomorrow." "Which one? We have 3. "The fun one, where we announce the internship program for formerly incarcerated women." Catherine's idea. She says brilliant minds end up behind bars for all sorts of reasons. Might as well recruit them. Speaking of recruitment, Madison pulled out her tablet. Sarah got the job, deputy director of the Calabrese Foundation. She wants to expand beyond forensic accounting into financial literacy for at-risk communities. Perfect. What about you? Still happy running operations? Getting there. Some days I still feel like I'm playing dress-up in a role I don't deserve. She helped me close out the register, but Sarah reminds me that imposter syndrome is just another lie we tell ourselves. Smart woman. The smartest. I'm lucky she forgave me for, the whole fake marriage thing. You were both victims of our father's manipulation. Forgiveness is what victims give each other to become survivors. We locked up together, sisters in truth, if not in blood, walking out into the Boston night. The city sparkled around us, full of promise and possibility. Catherine asked me to give you this, Madison said, handing me an envelope. Inside was an invitation written in my mother's precise hand. The Walsh Chen. Family requests your presence at the marriage of Catherine Walsh and Lynn Chen. Small ceremony, family only. Love conquers all, even decades of separation. I laughed, delighted. When? Next month. Sarah and I are planning it. Dorothy's officiating. Apparently she got ordained online specifically for this. Of course she did. I tucked the invitation carefully into my pocket. A wedding. Our family's first real celebration. First of many, Madison promised. We're thinking of doing a vow renewal next year, something honest this time. We parted ways at the corner, Madison heading home to Sarah, me walking toward my apartment where solitude waited. But it didn't feel lonely anymore. The city hummed with life around me, and I was part of it now. Not the emperor surveying from above, but a citizen among citizens connected by threads of truth and purpose. My phone buzzed. Catherine texting, "Lynn's making soup, too much for two, interested?" "On my way," I typed back. Family. The word had taken on new meaning these past months. Not blood or obligation or manipulation masquerading as love. Real family was choice daily renewed. It was Catherine choosing to return. Madison choosing honesty. Helen choosing to testify. Dorothy choosing to wait 35 years for justice. It was me choosing to stop by my mother's apartment for late-night soup and conversation, choosing connection over isolation, choosing to build rather than simply tear down. The doorman at Catherine's building knew me now, waving me through with a smile. The elevator rose smoothly, carrying me toward warmth and laughter and the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with people who knew all my truths and loved me anyway. Perfect timing, Lynn said, opening the door before I could knock. We were just debating whether ethical capitalism is an oxymoron or an evolution. Both, I said, entering the apartment that smelled like home. It's both. Catherine appeared from the kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, wearing an apron that said, "Economists do it with models." A gift from Lynn, apparently. "There's my daughter." She said the words still carrying wonder, 6 months later. "Ready to solve the world's problems over soup?" "Always," I said, meaning it. We sat around their small table, 3 women who'd found each other against all odds, debating theory and practice while sharing simple food. Outside, Boston slept. Somewhere, my father sat in his cell. The Calabrese brothers served their time. Bradley Thornton contemplated decades of consequences. We clinked cups, ceramic against ceramic, the sound ringing like bells announcing a new day. And in that moment, sitting with my mother and her love, knowing Madison and Sarah were home together, that Dorothy was probably reading in bed, that Helen was watching a New Zealand sunset. In that moment, I understood what victory really meant. It wasn't the fallen empire or the successful company or the justice served. It was this connection, truth. The choice to love after loss, to trust after betrayal, to build after destruction. "Tell us about the interview," Lynn prompted. "How did it go?" So I told them, and we talked until dawn painted the sky pink over Boston Harbor. 3 women planning a wedding and a future and 1,000 small revolutions that began with refusing to live lies. The city woke around us and we greeted it together, ready for whatever came next. The past was settled. The future was ours. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly where I wanted to be. Thank you for joining me on Alethea's journey from betrayal to triumph. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths? How did you find the courage to choose honesty? Like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about women who refuse to be silenced, families who choose truth over comfort, and the unbreakable bonds that form when we dare to be authentic. Remember, your story matters, your voice matters, and sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well and honestly. Until next time, may you find the strength to build something beautiful from whatever ashes life hands you.